time. My name is Tom Mattermore. As some of you know, I'm on the Planning Commission. What I came to talk about was last August, the University of Wyoming came before us for a zone change request for their new aquatic center. It was simply a change from R3 to allow them to put in their new swimming pool there. The discussion was not on the change so much as it was on the fact that they're probably going to have to cut 22nd Street and or Willett Drive to get utilities into this building. The official from the university there assured us that 15th Street would be open by the end of October. And that didn't happen. At the end of October, the university published on their listserv to faculty and staff that the 15th Street would be open by the start of the spring semester. We are past that date. They finally took down the cranes this weekend, so there's no need for them to block that street anymore. As of 10 o'clock this morning, the street looked like something out of an Old West movie. It was barren. There was nothing on it, no trucks, no vehicles, and it's covered in ice and snow, but it's still not open. The road is still closed. Some of you may not know, but as a young man, I worked for my grandfather's construction company. We built a building called 9 West 57th Street, which was in Manhattan on 57th Street between 5th Avenue and 6th Avenue, and it backed all the way up to 58th Avenue. We never closed that damn street once. We couldn't. If we had closed that street, there would have been $10,000 a day liquid damages. We never closed 58th Street. And that building went through. Now, my grandfather was a young man. He worked on the Empire State Building. They built the Empire State Building, and they didn't close any streets. So I think it's about time that the city kind of mentioned to the university that, it's about time to open the streets back up, particularly if they're getting to the point which they are in the aquatic center, where they may have to start bringing in utilities. They've got their dirt work advanced, and they're putting in foundations. So that's all I got to say. I'd like to remind everybody it's our street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mattermore. I appreciate your comments. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to the work session. Work session 1, Laramie Urban Renewal Agency, education about urban renewal and an update on the North 4th Street plan and project. Mr. Friesen.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, it's a pleasure to be here tonight to talk to you about the efforts of the Urban Renewal Agency and a potential urban renewal project that's coming up. Tonight's presentation is going to be led by Mark Christensen, AICP partner, senior planner for AVI. Mark's been in front of this council before, or councils before. Tonight what we intend to do is provide a little bit of education on what urban renewal agencies are, how it works in Wyoming, and then some updates on North 4th Street project, and then updates on how the plan and project related to North 4th Street project will move forward. So without having to listen to me extending your evening any further, I'm going to let Mark Christensen take over now.
Welcome.
All righty. Yes, thank you. Just get the presentation going for y'all. All right, members of the council, honorable mayor, my name is Mark Christensen. I am with AVI PC. We are located in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So tonight we'll be talking to you about the North 4th Street Urban Renewal Plan and Project, give you a little bit of a primer on the Laramie URA and the things that they're doing. But it is a privilege to be in front of you again. I believe the last time I was in front of this council, I was presenting this project as part of my graduate capstone project when I was down at CU Denver. And then I was also a student at the University of Wyoming. So it's great to be in front of you again and seeing this project that I worked on in graduate school continue to move forward. It's very exciting. So if you are willing and able to, we have a sort of interactive component to this presentation. It is called Menti. So it's mentimeter.com. It allows for some live polling as we're going through, just to gauge the council's perceptions and interests in the North 4th Street area, and then also just to get the conversation going. I would like you to feel free to interrupt me whenever you would like and have some of those discussions and be able to chat about some of these things. So if you can scan that QR code, go ahead. You can also go to www.menti.com and put in the code. As we move forward with this project, we'll be having a public meeting, which Todd will elaborate on a little bit. We'll be having that on Thursday. That will be more open house format. However, if we do more question and answer sessions, Menti is a great tool that we plan to employ with the public as well. With our agenda tonight, Todd will give a brief update on the North 4th, what's going on development-wise. There was an RFP that was released a couple of months ago, so the development interest with that, there's a urban renewal component to that, so Todd will update on that. We'll then talk about some of the applicable statutes in the blight overview. The blight overview is kind of the thing that really kicked this all off a couple years ago and started the Urban Renewal Agency in Laramie. Then we'll get into some of the public improvements that the council would like to see in the area and the preferred uses. So urban renewal in general is a tool that is used to help with these blighted areas. And one of the tools that is enabled by the urban renewal statutes is tax increment financing. So in order for this to really take place, there has to be that preliminary blight study, which finds that there's blight in the area. And then the Urban Renewal Agency is allowed to make a plan and project which can help the development community move forward and fund some of the gap in financing. With that, the first question that we have, just icebreaker, how familiar are you with the Laramie Urban Renewal Agency? We have one for general knowledge. Two for general knowledge. One is very familiar. Have between not at all familiar and general knowledge. So it kind of varying degree, which is what we anticipated, which is really why we wanted to have this introductory session. Does anybody want to share anything they know about the Urban Renewal Agency? Yeah.
Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Christensen. I was able to become the City Council liaison
Awesome.
for the LURA, so I met with Fresh Medical the other day and had lunch, and he just kind of brought me up to speed on some projects like this that with the presentations and such, so that's my introduction.
Awesome. Awesome.
Vice Mayor?
I can add that the URA can be used with the tax increment financing to improve properties, and that property owners have to kind of opt in. It's not something that the city tells them they have to do.
Yeah, so it is a great tool. Just general overview, we know the city of Laramie adopted that preliminary blight study in 2022. In order to have an urban renewal agency in the state of Wyoming, there has to be that preliminary declaration of blight, that there needs to be one or more blighted areas within the community, and that the rehabilitation is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare of the municipality. So the city of Laramie did complete that preliminary blight study, and that was in 2022. The Urban Renewal Agency was stood up about a year later and has really been moving forward with looking for projects, and the URA here has done a great job at setting up subcommittees that explore various different topics. One of the great things that the Urban Renewal Agency did here was host a kind of knowledge sharing back in July, where they invited a lot of municipalities from around the state. City of Cheyenne has an Urban Renewal Agency. City of Evanston has one as well. Green River has dabbled in it. So there's some other communities that have dabbled in it. I would say Cheyenne has done the most with it, but there's a lot of lessons learned with being the front runner in that too. So Laramie Urban Renewal Agency has used some of that information to guide its decision making and really set itself up for success. With that, I will let Todd give a brief update on North 4th in general.
brief. Brief is in the eye of the beholder, right? No, so first off, as we describe the North 4th Street project and we discuss what we're talking about, a lot of times what we're really talking about is the old Public Works facility, if you're not familiar with it, between Canby and Shields on 4th Street, about that half block for that entire 2-block radius, maybe 3-block radius is what we're talking about. Currently sitting on that facility right now are the old utility shop, the old street shop, shed, the old gas station that's been removed, and the animal shelter does land in that area that we'll have to make sure that we make considerations for as we do this. Interestingly, the North 4th Street project, we did go through an RFP to select some developers. They had submitted a proposal to Wyoming WCDA, and unfortunately last week we found that they were not selected to be forwarded and funded for any of the funding sources that they requested. In discussions with that firm, they're still interested in trying to move this project forward, so we're going to continue to work with them and see what we can figure out to try to get multifamily housing, maybe residential over commercial or residential over retail type situation, and still get that stood up in Laramie to provide some housing as we move through this project. A little bit about what we've got planned for the North 4th Street project. We are hosting 2 public meetings that Mark had indicated on Thursday from 11:30 to 1 p.m. and 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the old street shop, which is 955 North 4th Street. We thought it would be apropos to host the public meeting at the site that's intended to be lifted up through urban renewal. We'd encourage all council members to please attend. It's important that you gain some information and see the information and continue to get stronger as we move through these processes. At the conclusion of the 6:30 meeting, the Urban Renewal Agency is going to hold a special meeting that's going to be more updates on North 4th Street plan and project, and then we're also going to discuss another plan and project that may be coming forward in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark to get you guys some more information on urban renewal.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes, Mayor, through you. So we've gone over the foundations of the Urban Renewal Agency in the city of Laramie, but what this effort truly is looking at the plan and project for North 4th Street. So to begin, we have that preliminary declaration of blight. Like we mentioned, that blight declaration was adopted by the city council in 2022. And what that blight declaration had said is that there's blight generally located within the municipality. It did highlight 3 specific areas within the community that were blighted, one of them being the North 4th Street corridor. However, it did set the stage for a urban renewal plan and project to occur pretty much anywhere within the boundaries of the city. So once we have that declaration of blight, the urban renewal plan is essentially what are we going to do to remediate this condition of blight. So the blight is the overarching item that makes an area eligible for an urban renewal plan. The urban renewal plan states what will be done in the area to remediate that blight, and then there's specific projects that can happen within that plan area. The way that it's operated in the city of Cheyenne, there's a number of different urban renewal plans, and then the specific projects apply for they'll go through a tax increment financing application. And with that being said, we try to tie the plan and project as close together as possible, because there is a provision for tax increment financing generally, and when you tie that as close to as possible, you're able to maximize that tip because development is closer to happening. If you were to adopt a plan and the development weren't to happen for 2 or 3 years, you would lose out on 2 or 3 years of increment collection. So that's why they're tied closely together, and a lot of times we do call it the plan and project. So for the 15-9-107 states that an urban renewal project for an urban renewal area shall not be planned or initiated unless the governing body by resolution determined the area to be blighted. That was what was done in 2022. This is that preliminary blight determination. This was completed by Ayers Associates. I had worked for Ayers Associates at the time that this was going through council. But the North 4th Street area had some deteriorated structures. It is a little tough to read, sorry for that. But it had deteriorated structures. It had some conditions that were detrimental to health, safety, and welfare. There's a lot of flooding concerns over in the area. There is a poor street connection, and a lot of the buildings and street network that do not connect adequately, and just some other general conditions of blight. So once the preliminary blight determination for the area, there were 5 conditions of blight. So when we're thinking about an urban renewal plan, what are the things that we can do in the area to remediate this blight? What are some of the public improvements that are going to be enabled by this plan that might be eligible for tax increment financing? So once we go from the blight, it says that the urban renewal plan means a plan as it exists for one or more urban renewal areas or for any urban renewal project. This plan must conform to the general plan of the municipality as a whole, which would be the comprehensive plan. We know the city of Laramie is looking at updating the comprehensive plan, so this would closely tie, when we're thinking about that plan update, how can we closely tie the urban renewal plan and project to that plan update? And then it needs to be sufficient to indicate land acquisition, if there is any, the demolition and removal of structures, redevelopment, improvements, rehabilitation, and just any of those planning and zoning changes that need to be used, and if there's any other maximum densities or building requirements. So it's really general zoning considerations, use consideration, those sorts of things. So when we're thinking about it, we have those infrastructure improvements that we want to make, but then we also have the urban character, the redevelopment that we'd like to see on site. Urban renewal projects, so again, lots of text, but these are straight from state statutes. We highlighted the most important things, and I have to squint a little bit too, so sorry about that. But the urban renewal project is for the elimination and prevention of continuing blight in the area. It might include the demolition and removal of buildings and improvements, and the installation, construction of streets, utilities, parks, infrastructure, those sorts of things that are in accordance with the urban renewal plan. So this is a segment that really ties the urban renewal project to the urban renewal plan. So when a developer potentially comes in with a project, it needs to lie closely in relation to the urban renewal plan, and the sorts of things that are highlighted in that first component are those that might be eligible for tax increment financing. When the council looks to approve an urban renewal plan, there are specific criteria. We've talked about this a lot in the planning realm and with the WYO Pass group, and these statutes are very old. The urban renewal statutes were drafted in about 1960. In the 1960s, there was a lot of urban renewal throughout the country that looked at slum clearance for highway expansion, for building of campuses, those sorts of things. And one of the provisions that the plan and project must find is still latent with that language, which is a feasible method to relocate families who might be displaced by the urban renewal project. We are not looking at doing this in this specific instance. However, if there is any development that might result in that, there needs to be a plan to relocate those. However, there's no proposition to do that at this time. It's just a requirement that we find that it meets that in state statutes. It, again, must conform to the general plan. Third, it must have due consideration to adequate park space. This is great for this urban renewal area because it's next to one of the gyms of the City of Laramie Parks and Recreation System. And then lastly, the urban renewal plan must afford maximum opportunity consistent with the municipality needs for the rehabilitation and redevelopment by private enterprise. This is where in the city of Cheyenne we've seen a lot of development agreements that tie the city, the developer's lender, and the developer to a development agreement to make some of those public improvements. So another little break. How familiar are you with tax increment financing? And if you're not familiar with it, we'll be getting into it in the next slide. So it looks like we're hovering around the middle here. And this is a very long statement that essentially says this. So when tax increment financing occurs and it's enabled through an urban renewal agency when a plan and project is adopted. Once a plan and project is adopted, the existing tax base is set at a level and it goes to the taxing jurisdictions that are already within the area. Might be the weed and pest, school district, city, county, those sorts of things. They will be collecting the taxes that they currently collect at the property value. There is no new tax with an urban renewal agency. It really with a urban renewal agency and PIF, it really just recaptures that increase in tax and allows it to be reinvested into the property. This graphic shows that those incremental taxes above the existing base can be used to finance some of the public improvements that are within the plan and project area, and then once the plan and project area is complete, the entire new tax base rises. We've also, I just recently saw this described as a glass of water with a few ice cubes in it. So the ice cubes are that tax increment. They're reinvested into the project, and as long as the project is going, as long as those ice cubes are still ice cubes, those will be directed and reinvested into the project, and then once the project is complete, that ice melts, the taxes go into the different taxing entities. A lot of critiques of urban renewal and tax increment financing state that this is capturing the tax revenue from those other entities that increased. However, the entities are foregoing it for a certain amount of time. If the redevelopment never occurred, it could be argued that those taxes would never increase anyways. So there is a little bit of education with that, I would say, and we've had some success over in Cheyenne with having big conversations with those taxing entities, having work sessions with them similar to what we're doing with you, and having public meetings where we mail notice. One of the interesting things that we haven't really mentioned is with the urban renewal statutes, there's not a lot of requirements for public notifications and notification of those taxing entities. But it's important to be proactive and do that anyway, and City of Laramie has done that, Laramie URA has done that, so that's really just building that knowledge base so we can be successful and be good partners to our taxing entities. So thus far, we have identified the project area. It includes, as Todd had mentioned, those 4th Street properties that are owned by the city. It includes the entirety of the park and then some adjacent parcels. Todd can go a little bit more if there's some questions on why those adjacent parcels were selected. I know we had some discussion with Todd and Fred about that, but the real impetus was the properties around the park. But we did want to ask the council, if we're looking about urban renewal and we're looking at some blighted structures, some things that might need some rehabilitation, it's important to set the project area because that's where the tax base will be set, and that's where the increment will be collected, and it is also where the increment can be used as well. So if there's a property that's adjacent that might need some curb gutter and sidewalk improvements, if it's outside of the project area, then it wouldn't be eligible for those funds. So we did want to ask, should the project area be expanded? And please pin on the image where you think the boundaries should be expanded to. And if you do place a pin on the image, please feel free to elaborate. And in general too, if there are, you can also use this if there's a known drainage concern, a known building concern, that sort of thing. These are the sorts of things that we want to capture in the plan and project, so we're intentional about making those corrections as we move forward. So we have the first blue pin up there. Can the council member that dropped that elaborate?
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Hey, Mark. I just, wanted to keep it just on that boundary. I don't recall anything on that west side of the road, but I just moved it over just in case. Hearing you say curb and gutter, I'm sure that's been looked at by everyone who's been working on this for a long time, but I just moved it right across the side of the road because I thought, if anything, that would make sense, but
Cool.
no specific reason besides that.
And we've set up a number of plan and project areas. I think that's great, Mayor, through you to Councilman Freed. The expanding the boundaries at least to the center of the right-of-way and maybe even across the street, just to really make sure you encompass the entire public realm that's adjacent to it, is really beneficial, and it's something that we definitely try to do.
Vice Mayor Richardson.
I was just thinking about this, and I was thinking like all of the flooding that happens down through 4th Street, even down into 3rd Street, and potentially, making sure we're thinking about curb and gutter and all these different things that could really help, especially if that's a two-way highway, to be cognizant of that and just make sure we're being thoughtful about the flooding.
Definitely.
Assistant City Manager.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to have Mark expand. You know, the importance of the area is, the denotation of the area is important because the way that I understand it, I want to make sure that I understand it correctly, is that the tax increment financing that's collected can only be spent in the project area. You know, and so that's why it is so important that we really take a slow, long, hard look at what the project area entails and make sure that, you know, even if you're just, I don't know, 100 feet off of the plan and project area, I'm sure you can amend it, but it's just better if you don't try to amend these things and just make sure that we have the areas we'd like to address within the plan project.
Mark? Oh, Counselor Freed?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mark, I guess just a question about that in here in Todd's remarks. Is there typically a buffer that's set aside outside of maybe like the primary, secondary goals of projects like these, you know, to kind of encompass some of those unforeseen things? Or moving forward, I'm just curious if you know, moving it across the road or 3 blocks is seen in some of this stuff.
Yes, through you, Mayor. It is important. I would say there's generally not a buffer. It would need to be included when we're taking that first look at it. So we would want to look at it holistically. And one of those things that the Vice Mayor mentioned is when we think about drainage, a lot of those are larger network issues. So if we know that the pinch point might be further downstream, you know, finding a way to get that pinch point into the plan and project area would be something that we'd want to do. Procedurally wise, when we build an urban renewal plan, I would like, they are able to be amended from time to time. However, they need to go through planning commission and then come to the council. So there are time considerations with that. So we do like to look at it holistically when we think about it, but it is also difficult to anticipate all the issues that we might see.
Mark? Sorry. Counselor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark. One thing I think instead of just looking at this, you know, this picture, is for us to go drive it. We need to get out and take an actual look at it. I tried to drive around a little bit today without knowing exact boundaries like this. I think you just go out and walk it and look at it, and that would help us identify maybe we need to include this section or what have you versus just, you know, because I agree with the flooding, you know, that's not something about me either. Since I've been in Laramie, you know, anytime we get a big rain or something like that, so I'd like to be able to do that, walk it, drive it. I'd like to be able to go walk it or drive it. Thank you.
Counselor Newman.
And that's why I dropped the pin where I did up there, because that's kind of where some of the flooding is, and some bad roadway and maybe lack of sidewalks. So even a couple more, just what is that, 2 blocks more north, could be useful in this plan, and especially if there's no buffer zone. You know, we fix one side of the street, now the other side needs fixed and it doesn't look good. So, but I know those 2 properties there need help.
Mark?
Yeah, and so I think that's great to kind of denote those things, and when we think about it too, we'll have a similar map up at the public meeting where we'll be able to post some sticky red pins on some problem areas, and it's supposed to be nice this week, so you might be able to get out and walk it a little bit, but it's important to think about when we're thinking about the plan and project area, we have the specific developments that might need some gap financing, whether it be stormwater improvements or some improvements that are required to get their project going. But a lot of times those projects can generate more tax increment than they will actually need, and that's where we can look at some other areas where we might be able to make some of those improvements more generally for the project area. Alrighty, so we've discussed a little bit what some of those improvements need to be. This is another voting item, so you're able to select, I think you should be able to select multiple. I hope I enabled that. But these are what are some improvements that need to be made in the North Fourth study area? We have discussed some of the stormwater, some of the curb gutter and sidewalk, but urban renewal can be used to enhance public spaces, and we've also seen it be used for facade enhancements as well. That's something that influences the public realm and might allow a building to go above and beyond what zoning code would require, those sorts of things, and really make a nice inviting pedestrian area as the North 4th Street redevelopment plan had called for. And if you did select other, I will pick on you to see what that one is.
Councilor Newman.
I picked other. You can only pick one, so
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I was like, yeah. So that's the only reason why I picked other, because there's a whole bunch there that could be picked, so I picked other. And you're more than welcome to pick on me.
Sounds good. Mayor, when we have future public meetings, I know there's an option to enable more than just one, but it does seem like stormwater might be the most pressing concern. And so next, these are the things that will be incorporated into the urban renewal plan and project. What sorts of uses would you like to see in the North 4th Street area? And I'm guessing you can only select one, so what's your favorite? We have multifamily, townhomes, fast food, office, retail shop, pedestrian plaza, and live work. When we completed the North 4th Street redevelopment plan, we did a similar exercise with City Council, what we did in that situation, and a lot of it is told out in that redevelopment plan. If you haven't had the opportunity to review it, we selected a variety of different uses that could be placed in the study area, and we also determined the number of parking spaces that would be needed. So we pieced together these piecemeal maps of what the redevelopment could look like, and use that to sketch out the 3 different redevelopment options in that plan. So we have multifamily, live work, and townhomes. That resonates with what we're hearing in the community and in communities throughout Wyoming, is that we do need more housing. And a lot of the housing developers that we work with at AVI, there's a gap in some of the financing, and that's what tax increment financing can be used for. When we think about tax increment financing, it's a tool, and the Laramie Urban Renewal Agency will have the ability to vet some of these applications. When somebody wants tax increment financing, there will first be a review to show the need for the tax increment financing, and then the project will also be assessed on the merits. Does it accomplish what Laramie Urban Renewal Agency is seeking to accomplish? Does it accomplish what the City of Laramie City Council is seeking to accomplish? Those sorts of things. So it's not a handout for developers. It's something that the city has the power to use and accept these projects that are in line with the vision of the comprehensive plan, with the North 4th Street redevelopment plan, and those sorts of things.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I might be getting a little bit too into the weeds here, but Assistant City Manager, you had mentioned that the grant had not come through and said something about perhaps, can you go into what would, in terms of bang for your buck and how you are able to get them the most housing for the dollars available while thinking of kind of like workforce situation? Is a developer going to be looking for more of a multifamily or this kind of mixed-use townhomes, or is that something you can answer yet?
Honorable Mayor, through you to come to Vice Mayor Richardson. Yeah, the developer had actually proposed a mixture of townhomes, multifamily, and live work in the entire place. Was a nice development, but it was also pretty grand for Laramie and what you can afford to build and how you do it. And that's why the the WCDA granting was so important. So we'll be meeting with that developer over the next couple of weeks, and we'll also be meeting with WCDA on other opportunities that might be available and continuing to bolster and decide how we get this project moving forward. So that's all inclusive. Thank you. You're welcome. Oh. Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
And Mayor, through you, just not to confuse, we do have the specific development proposal, but the plan and project area will also, it has those boundaries beyond those city-owned properties. So these sorts of developments, when we're thinking about what else would we like to see, it's not only the city-owned properties, but it's also the other parcels that might be within the development area, which the development proposal, as Todd had mentioned, is closely in line with these options that we've thrown up there.
Honorable Mayor, I love my job, but I like to have fun, and I just want to be noted that if Nancy Bartholomew had voted and it was a Kentucky Fried Chicken where the McDonald's was, she would have voted for the Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Aye.
Duly noted. Councilor O'Doherty.
I like the choices that my fellow councilors chose. I didn't put the app on my phone, but I feel like housing is really what we need. We have plenty of space for fast food. We have empty offices. We have a retail space just north of there that is often empty. And as much as I like pedestrian plazas, I want there to be places for people to live. Thanks.
And I didn't use my phone. I would have gone live, work, and then multifamily. So housing.
Housing. Very closely in line with what we're feeling around the state. So just in closing, thank you again for your time. It's been great to be back here in Laramie. I always like a good excuse to come over to Laramie, so appreciate your time. So thinking about next steps, this month we've done some background research, had the city council work session. Then we will have public meeting open house number 1. A lot of these questions that we've asked you, we've put into boards. This will be an open house, so it'll be come and go. There won't be a formal presentation. However, we will direct members that want a sort of formal presentation to the recording of this meeting, and they'll be able to view this, and then I'll also make myself available for any questions. I'll also be at the open house, that sort of thing. In February, we plan to launch a planned survey that will likely go to all the property owners within the area, and then also the attendees of the public meeting. If they're not able to attend the public meeting and they would like to take the survey, we're not holding it back. So they'll feel free to reach out to Todd and get that information. So future steps, we'll draft a plan, have another public meeting, and get into the plan formalization and adoption proceedings. As Todd mentioned, the WCDA funding did not go through on that project, so we'll kind of regroup with the development and see how they would like to move forward and optimize the plan adoption as close to the development breaking ground as close as possible. Again, with adoption proceedings, it will go through the Planning Commission and then come through City Council. And then with the Urban Renewal Agency, if the plan does enable TIF, which we believe it will, the City Council acts as a fiduciary for that. The City of Laramie acts as the fiduciary. So the funds would be deposited into a special fund for the City of Laramie. So development agreements would need to be approved by the City of Laramie as well. So that's kind of how the process generally works. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Councilors? Councilor O'Doherty.
WCDA, it's Wyoming Community Development
Association.
Authority?
Authority.
Okay, yeah.
Authority, okay.
So what portion of the project were they being asked to fund? I'm trying to understand how the infrastructure and the developers, how that puzzle all fits together.
Honorable Mayor, when they apply for WCDA, they don't necessarily apply for a portion of the project or a certain pieces of the project to fund. They had requested from the HOME fund roughly $2.6 million, if I remember correctly. actually across two different applications. They'd requested almost $5 million across the NHTF, $635, and then the 9% tax credits. They had requested about $2 million. And basically what each of those does is it lines up the service population of the residents of the area and the percentages that they need to keep for affordable housing versus market rate housing, if I understand it correctly.
Councilor Vihil?
Thank you, Mayor Cumby, and thank you, Mark, for being here. Maybe just kind of a practical question. So let's say we get through all of the funding pieces and we're ready to start any kind of construction or whatever that looks like. What kind of impacts would you anticipate for our animal shelter in the area?
So, Mayor, through you, I think the development had planned to start more on the north side. So there has been some thought put into that, and I think Todd could probably elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Honorable Mayor, through you to
Yes.
Councilor Vihil. Councilor, the animal shelter will be impacted by this project, there's no doubt. The city's got two options. We can either plan around it and try to leave it in place, or we can look to fund it through revenues off of this project and maybe build a new animal shelter in the future. But those decisions haven't been made just at this point, but they are in the infancy stages as we move through. Okay.
Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Christensen. I've got a million questions. A lot of people hit me up, and I'm going to save for a lot of them for the open house,
Sounds good.
so I don't monopolize this evening. But one question, and maybe I just didn't read it, who is the developer?
Our developer that was selected through the RFP process to work with is called Northwest Group,
Okay. Where they out of, Mr. Cruz?
Idaho.
Okay. May I follow up on the question?
Follow up, yes.
Okay, thank you. We had talked about the animal shelter, the crisis center being another one that is further south, will be impacted eventually if this goes through. Whether we have an idea how that's going to be able to be remedied.
The Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Lockhart. The Crisis Center actually won't be impacted. We're currently in the City Manager's office working on with the Crisis Center on an expansion project, so they'll be able to stay as they are.
Excellent. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Richardson?
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. This has been great. And again, I might be getting a little too far in the weeds here, but you had noted that the TIF often generates more than it needs for the project. Can you explain that a little bit? From my understanding, due to the 25-year, and maybe this goes back to making sure that your project and your plan align so that you're able to use both at the same time. But there have been instances where those the 25-year timeline doesn't line up with kind of the project plan aligning, and then it makes it a little more difficult to raise those funds. Am I wrong on that?
So, Honorable Mayor, through you to the Vice Mayor, in order to successfully utilize those funds, it needs to be very intentional in the plan that those sorts of improvements are anticipated to be funded by the tax increment financing. So going through the process, we need to be intentional in looking at what those other improvements might be, because there is a provision in the state statutes in the tax increment financing that says when all the indebtedness has been paid, then the TIF goes back into the funds of the taxing jurisdictions. However, if there are additional improvements that are laid out to be funded by the increments, such as some curb, gutter, and sidewalk on adjacent properties, if the city and LURA outlines what those are and gets those underway with the anticipation of those being funded through the TIF, that will ensure that they'll be eligible for it. However, it is important to lay those out in the plan, or once the improvements for the project itself are fully funded, then the TIF would cease to exist at that point.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Councilor Shumway?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Hopefully we have an answer to this. For the open house, which I think has been scheduled for Thursday at the Park Shop, correct? What happens if more than 4 of us show up and start talking about plans for the future?
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Shumway, it's actually at the old street shop in the big garage, so there's probably room for 100 people in that shop.
The question-
Counselor Shumway.
Oh, you're talking about the quorum of council.
Correct.
Honestly, the way that I read it, and I think we'll need some interpretation from the city clerk, is that if you're not making business decisions, that you can be at a public meeting together.
Yeah, I believe, Assistant City Manager, this would be considered work of the public, so I would recommend that one of you remove yourself if you show up at the same time and maybe go to the next meeting. Or ask your fellow counselor to text you when they leave, and then you can come in, something like that,
And there are 2 sessions, so there's an earlier session and a later session. And in other meetings that are considered work of the council, where we are invited to attend a legislative gathering or the president's gathering, et cetera, one of the criteria have been not to gather, for us not to gather together, to avoid that while we're there. But it could be even easier since there are 2 sessions if we check in with each other. I know I'm going to the second. I know you're going to the second and not the first because we have interviews. So, and City Clerk, did you have something else?
Mayor, I would say if you do have questions that you're uncomfortable with, the city attorney would be a good person to reach out to for confirmation as well.
Agreed. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And Bob has done it in the past when there are events like this that could potentially bring us all together. Kind of to your point, Sharon, just if it holds 100 people, get in your corner of the room perhaps and don't mingle with the other counselors. So if there happen to be more than 5 of us there.
We'll spread out the boards.
There we go. Perfect.
Counselor Newman?
Couldn't we just post a possibility of a special meeting so that this isn't a problem? Because I would like to go to both, right? Because there's going to be people who missed the first one, and I'm talking citizens, not just us. So couldn't we just publish something that a possibility of not a special meeting, but a special work session to where we're all covered that way? Because it looked like 4 people raised their hand for the first one already, or the second one already, so we're going to be in violation to cover ourselves. Couldn't we just post something saying the city council are going to meet at this meeting as well?
I think it would be best if we contact the city attorney, but in the past, in situations where all have been in attendance, we were told, do not congregate. So we can be in the same room, but not congregating and talking among ourselves. But we will clarify that with the city attorney. Counselor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess for city clerk, we can't call a special meeting within 2 days. Is that correct? Do we have rules about that?
So state statute does say that you can call a special meeting with 8 hours notice to the public. Keep in mind, 8 hours notice to the public is really hard to inform people about, but it can be done. We do the best we can to spread the word. The other thing to note, if you call a special meeting or a work session, just keep in mind, we do have to pay the counselors for attending the work session or the special meeting. So we've got a little bit of fiduciary back end on those too. But it can be done, so.
So I think the next step is to check with city attorney and have him send his conclusion to each of us, to all of us.
Yeah, and the special meeting could be called by the mayor or majority of the council members, just to clarify that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Yes, thank you very
We
much.
really appreciate your coming over and taking the time to present to us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there any public comments on this item? Welcome, Mr. Mattermore.
Honorable Mayor, City Councilors, when this first came up in front of the Planning Commission, I was pretty vehemently opposed to it, having seen some of the ill effects of urban renewal. But as it's gone through the process and seeing the projects that they have in mind, I've come to support this urban renewal effort, and hopefully it'll go through. The big problem has always been the financing. I think we can get the county to go along with these projects because currently the projects in mind are not generating any property tax because they're city properties. So there's really no loss to the county treasurer. And I think these areas that have been outlined, the 4th Street area, is in need of something. I think there's a lot of potential there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes. If you want to come to the podium and state your name, please, for the record.
Hi, my name is Evan Grendel. I live in West Laramie, so I don't really live specifically in that area, but I was just having a consideration when you guys were thinking about expanding the urban renewal area. I know that particularly there's probably some ADA requirements for having like wheelchair ramps going up onto curbs if you were to do any new developments in an area. So I was just curious if I know that there's some considerations for expanding wheelchair accessibility across the whole city, and I know that that area is fairly close to some services that people might access, and 4th is almost directly down here. So it would be an interesting consideration to see if there would be an availability to use this as an opportunity to increase accessibility for that part of the city. That's my only thought about that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other comment? Thank you. Seeing none, move on to the next work session, which is the Reconnect West Laramie Plan discussion. Welcome, Mr. Gaventhaler.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council.
Mr. Gaventhaler, we might wait 1 minute. It appears that some are leaving after the previous topic. Okay. Thank you. All right, continue.
All right. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Good evening again, Honorable Mayor, members of council. Thank you for allowing this item to be on your work session this evening. We're very excited to be the recipients of a grant from the Reconnecting Communities Grant Program, a grant program through the Federal Department of Transportation that's aimed to addressing transportation barriers that divide communities with a focus on equity, accessibility, and safety. This grant program is specifically aimed at communities like Laramie that have these barriers such as the interstate, river, state highway, as well as railroad tracks separating areas of town, significant areas of town. We really feel like this grant program was built for us, and we were the recipients, as I mentioned, of a $250,000 grant. And this grant program is 5 years long. It's funded through 2026, federal fiscal year 2026. The grant we received was a planning grant, but there are capital improvement grant opportunity as well to follow up on if the recommendations that we do have from this program are worth moving forward with. I'll say the minimum application or the minimum amount to apply for a capital grant is $5 million. So keep that in mind when we're talking this evening and we're having our work session. It's in the transportation world, it is all relative, I will say. So I want you all to really, when we get into the work session piece, which will be led by our team that we're working with, that are experts in this field of transportation planning and community engagement and so forth. I really encourage you to think outside the box, think big, really, because a lot of these are going to be long-term recommendations, but you'll see that there are also some that we could do with a pretty immediate impact in the near future. But I don't think I need to spend too much time talking about the connectivity challenges of West Laramie. I know we've talked about this. We've been in front of council in the last year discussing applying for this grant, the community engagement that we did to get the grant, which we already engaged a lot of businesses, a lot of stakeholders over there, Linford Elementary, Territorial Prison. So a lot of folks are aware of this effort. So I will just briefly introduce the team we're working with. Like I said, I'm just here to kind of tee it up, and Bill Dello from DJ&A is going to do this work session similar to what you just went through with Mark. But DJ&A, like I said, they have expertise in transportation planning, engineering, public engagement, and I'll also say a member of their team does regularly work with railroad, with kind of the railroad realm, which will be a major issue with any project that we proceed with or recommend. I'll say also we have the university involved as well. I'll let Bill talk a little bit about that and how we're hoping to engage with students and faculty over there to kind of up the engagement and kind of get better ideas of how to engage folks over there. But without further ado, I know we got a full agenda tonight. I'd like to bring Bill up here to lead the work session.
Thank you. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Thank you, Philip, for the introduction. Really excited to be here tonight and talk with you about the Reconnect West Laramie project. As Philip noted, as part of this presentation, I'll provide an overview of what we'll be looking at on the technical side and analyzing the connectivity between West Laramie, the west side, and Laramie proper. Also talk a little bit about the community engagement effort that we're undertaking and partnering with students from the university as well. And then at the end of the presentation, I have about 4 questions for you all, just to get your input and your thoughts as we really kick off this project effort and move through our effort, and so you can help guide us as we're working through this component. So a quick overview of the project. We have 5 key objectives. We're looking, as Philip mentioned, to improve connectivity for all modes between West Laramie, the west side, and Laramie proper, east of the Union Pacific Corridor. While the project title focuses on West Laramie, we really are interested in connecting all 3 of these areas of the city. And we're looking for that connection really to be two-way. It's not just getting people from West Laramie over to Laramie proper. It's allowing people to move west and access the employment, biotech, other uses that may be either now or in the future in those portions of the city. And we want to make these connections, we want to improve them and make them accessible, make them useful, make them inviting for people to use, and make them open and available to people of all ages and abilities, so that whether it's children, whether it's seniors, or whether it's middle-aged folks, you're able to use different facilities and use whatever mode of transportation you're interested in using to be able to travel between the 2 parts of the city. As you're probably all aware, there's several barriers to transportation and connectivity within this part of the city. The interstate, Snowy Range Road, the Union Pacific Corridor, the river, all in different ways make it difficult to travel east-west from one part of the city to the other. And we'll be looking for ways to address that connectivity and lessen the impact of these barriers. And engagement really is a focal point of our study. We want to hear from residents in all three areas within the city, as well as university students. And so later in the presentation, I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the tactics, some of the strategies we're going to use to be able to do that. And that community engagement effort will really help to guide our planning efforts, and we've decided or tried to time the community engagement to really feed into the different elements that we're going to identify in terms of identifying improvements, evaluating those improvements, and prioritizing them as well. So this map here shows our study area. We've highlighted, of course, West Laramie in yellow, the west side in pink. It shows our barriers with the interstate, the river, and the railroad corridor, and then the relationship to downtown Laramie and the university as well. As I mentioned, we're very much focused on the connectivity, both east and west, not just in one direction. So I'll talk a little bit now about our scope of work. We have 6 primary tasks within our work. Task 1 is in the investigation of existing conditions. That's where we are now, kicking off the project this month. As part of the presentations this evening and last night to Planning Commission, we've also been on site walking the study area. We went on a 7-mile walk this morning all the way from downtown to West Laramie and back. So really kind of putting ourselves in residents' shoes of how do you get around? How do you move? Does it make sense? Does it feel safe? Is it intuitive? Really trying to understand conditions on the ground. Task 2 is the engagement of the community, which really will extend throughout our study process and really be integrated into our planning effort throughout. Task 3 is the development of innovative alternatives, development of those improvements. As we've started to talk with different stakeholders and with city staff, we're really starting to understand the need to be both practical in terms of our improvements. So what blocks maybe don't have a sidewalk or don't have bicycle facilities or maybe don't have a connection. That's really important to a particular destination, but also be aspirational. And it really goes to what Philip mentioned, thinking about, there is the potential for construction grant funding to implement recommendations. So as we think 10 years into the future, what are kind of the big ideas that could be there to improve connectivity within this part of the city? The second round of engagement that we'll be looking to do in the early part of summer will really help to inform Task 4, which is the selection of preferred alternatives. Really starting to identify, what are we going to recommend that the city moves forward with, pursue that grant funding and implement. Are these projects that could be part of the city's regular capital improvement program and implemented in short order? Or are they more long-term where you need to think about some additional planning and design and start pursuing grant funding to be able to implement different projects? With the second part of this year, second part of the project, we'll move into developing some concept designs and costs for certain preferred alternatives, really to inform that process of pursuing grant funding for project construction and implementation, and then put together our final report and the final recommendations for the study. So as part of our effort, we're really building on prior planning efforts that the city has completed. The work with residents in the West Side and the development of the West Side Vision here recently, previous specific studies of the Snowy Range Corridor and past coordination with WYDOT to look at implementing multimodal facilities along that corridor. We're certainly looking to build off the Parks and Rec master plan. We met with the director of Parks and Rec yesterday, as well as staff to understand their objectives and goals and how we can tie into that, as well as other planning efforts. One in particular was the outreach and engagement that the city did in the preparation of the grant application, which has really given us a great foundation of understanding from the community what their needs and challenges are in terms of connectivity in this part of the city. A few takeaways from those prior planning efforts, certainly a need, and we've heard a lot and seen a lot of more sidewalks in West Laramie, allow people to be able to move and get around within the neighborhood. Additional connections to destinations across Interstate 80 and the Union Pacific Railroad. You look at West Laramie on the west side, there's no grocery stores. They are really a food desert. You don't have access to a lot of options in terms of grocery stores, markets, restaurants, and opportunities to be able to eat. So it's really important for that connection. I think also, as we've heard from some stakeholders while we've been here too, is access to medical facilities and appointments, doctor's appointments, and so forth. One of the discussions that's really started to build is, options for transit. Maybe that doesn't look like a fixed route bus service, but maybe it looks like something that's more on-demand type of transit service that really could be flexible to serve people's needs and take them to their destinations, but also do so in a way that could be lower cost and could offer opportunities for partnership with the university, with WyoTech, with the territorial prison, and other entities that might be able to partner in that type of service. And then there's, this desire for a gathering place and connectivity to places where people can gather, both in the west side and in West Laramie, and then that connectivity to jobs. And that is an element that I do think is also part of this two-way travel. As we start to see more employment going in the southern part of West Laramie, there are going to be a fair number of people in the east part of the city, central and east part of the city, that will want to travel out there. We need to make sure that we provide that connectivity to employment as well. So some of the strategies that we'll be looking at highlighted in these photos, certainly we're really building on some of the existing assets that are present in this part of the city. There's a lot of opportunity out there. The Greenway is a great existing asset that we really want to connect into and build on. The footbridge at Garfield Street, while it's not perfect, it's not great for riding a bike on, or, it's not great when it's really cold and snowy. It does provide a really convenient connection for pedestrians. And Snowy Range Road does serve that vehicular traffic between the different areas within our project area. But they're really not enough to satisfy all of the mobility and connectivity needs that we see within this part of the city. So we really want to know from the community, and this is something we'll talk to them about through the engagement, where do they want to go? How do they want to get there? Kind of how are they getting there today, and why? And why maybe they're not using other modes of transportation, maybe because it feels unsafe, or because the distance is too far, or just because it may be difficult to go to the grocery store and then kind of walk home when it's below freezing and snowing. But we want to understand those those nuances from the community and why they choose to travel, when and how that they do. So this slide just provides a brief overview of our schedule. As I mentioned, we're looking at about a 12-month process, starting here in January, working through our existing conditions for the first 2 months in January and February, and then moving into the community engagement effort in the March and June time period, so spring, early summer. And really those engagement, that we've highlighted in orange, they really are timed to feed into, as noted, our development of improvements and alternatives, and then having the community help us start to select different preferred alternatives for the implementation of improvements and moving forward to the concept design, and then the final report. So I'll talk a little bit about the engagement, provide a little bit more background on that before we jump to my questions for council. As we mentioned, we really do want to build on the previous efforts. We recognize that we're not starting from scratch. So we're really going to respect the community's time and their participation. And as we move into engagement, really start asking them about what they think about potential improvements and the opportunities that are present within the study area, and where they'd like to see us focus our efforts on the planning side. As Philip mentioned, we have also involved the university and university students as part of this effort. Earlier today, I've had a couple of meetings with students presenting in front of a class, and then also talking with graduate students who are starting their capstone project, and talking with them about how we can have them participate in the community engagement effort, attending our open houses, conducting pop-up activities for us, either at community events or potentially being stationed at the Garfield footbridge and asking people people as they're traveling back and forth across the bridge. Where are they going? What works for them in terms of that connection? Really kind of extending our reach and being able to get a connection into the community, and also with the university as well, to understand their needs. And so I think it'll be really valuable for our efforts on the community engagement effort to have that involvement. So as we've highlighted, we have 3 rounds of community engagement. We're in round 1 right now with our kickoff, the presentations to Planning Commission and Council, and the meetings we've been conducting with different departments within the city. We're also in the process of developing a project webpage and an online survey so we can help get the word out and have a location where the community can learn about the project outside of our events. Round 2, which we'll be looking to conduct here in the early spring, will include additional stakeholder meetings as well as open houses and those pop-up events, really starting to ask people what they think about some of our initial ideas for connectivity and where improvements really should be focused. And then in round 3, as we move into the early summer, that's where we'll have more concrete ideas and different project ideas to share with the community and start to get their feedback on really what they believe their priorities to be, where we should recommend that the city focus its efforts moving forward. And so that concludes the presentation portion of my discussion this evening. And so I have a few questions, Mayor and Council, if I can go into that. Yeah.
Councilors, any questions? Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you I talked to you last night. I had the opportunity to listen to this presentation at the Planning Commission meeting. So there was a lot of good questions brought up. So I was asking about the community voices. We want to make sure that we ask, the Wyotech students. We got the university students, but we got that side, and then the West Laramie residents.
Yep.
It's a big deal because we're trying to reconnect them to here also. So I think those are 2 things that we really want to consider. So that's more of just a rehash of what we talked about last night. That was a really good statement. Thank you.
Councilor Bowling. Oh, sorry.
I have a few, but I'll do one and then send it to my Councilor Newman. This might be more a question for the Assistant City Manager, and thank you, Mayor. How, if at all, does this planning and proposal relate to the shared use pathway connector project that we worked on last week and that Thena Engineering is now contracted to do study on?
I'll defer to Bill a little bit, but the project that we've highlighted in that is, to me, a no-brainer for connectivity between West Side, West Laramie, and Laramie proper. So what we have moving forward is going to be entailed. They'll have a couple meetings with the engineer to make sure that it's moving through, and we'll go through the process like that. But they are tied closely together. I was confident going into that project, of which we've had funding for since 2024, that it was going to fit nicely with this. And I think it's going to be a great position for us to show, hey, we're already moving forward with some of the things that have already been found in the plan. Bill?
Yeah, and I think it's a great foundational building block for us in really making what is an important connection, and it's something that we can really build off of. And so I think our focus is going to be knowing that that project is moving forward. How do we build on that and connect to that and kind of, use this as a great building block to improve connectivity?
Thank you. Councilor Newman.
First off, thanks for coming and presenting. This is really important, especially from the people in West Laramie, who a couple of us represent. And I know that this was some of the topics discussed when we ran for these seats. And I also like to thank Councilor Lockhart for bringing Wyotech into this, because they're going to have a pretty big voice as soon as they start building across the street too. So to answer this question though, everybody, and not only the citizens in Laramie, there are people out on 130 who haul water And with 4th Street becoming a topic, maybe some sort of water station in West Laramie would help that. But there are a bunch of residents on 130 who have reached out to me, and I'm like, well, I don't represent you. However, I do, because they come to Laramie and they spend their money here, and they have jobs here and businesses here. So I think we need to look at other communities who would benefit from this reconnection as well. And I know the water station was one of them that was brought up, but and then I'll wait for you to ask the other questions to answer those.
Councilor Vigil?
Thank you, Mayor Cumby. And Bill, thanks for being here. You're singing my song. This is such a passion of mine, reconnecting West Laramie. I guess, yeah, to answer the question and to just echo Councilor Newman, I think everyone, and I think there are ways that, council can help partner on this too. So especially for those of us who serve West Laramie, we're all out on the campaign trails. We know our neighborhoods. Bringing the information to our neighbors' doorsteps, I think, is going to be really important. I think on a previous slide, you mentioned something about pop-up events. I think that would be really, really important in bringing those pop-up events to West Laramie. So I'm thinking like, I don't know, a barbecue in Kiwanis Park or, anything like that I think would be great. But I think as much information as we can provide to people where they are will be really critical.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And this question, maybe I should hold tight until the end, is more about kind of going back to that funding that we had talked about. Should I ask that now or wait till the end?
Be okay with that now?
You all right with me asking that now? So my question is, and maybe, Todd, maybe you have an answer for this, but does our census tract status increase our opportunities for funding additional funding, or is this grant completely separate in terms of utilizing that data?
I'll jump at it. So, unfortunately, our census tract status in West Laramie is not good. Those tracts don't actually show up in the low-income census tracts, if I understand correctly. But that doesn't mean some of the stuff that we recently heard from WCDA is that the entire municipality is actually eligible for WCDA grants. So, because of our poverty level status, so there are some ways to look at grants differently in what we go for. But as far as federally, if they do have the requirement to end up in a low-income census tract or disadvantaged census tract, none of those tracts show up in that map.
That's correct. In the West Laramie area, there are other areas, other tracts within the city that do, and so I think that's, as we've kind of been thinking about our approach to the project, and part of the idea of, it's not just connection from West Laramie to Laramie proper, it really is that other way as well. And I think that further helps to strengthen the city's case for pursuing that funding in the future. So kind of thinking about it strategically from that standpoint, and really recognizing this planning process is to set that foundation for pursuing additional funding. We're going to look for those opportunities to kind of make sure we set you up for success in pursuing that effort.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, thanks for being here and in the presentation. I guess, one thought would be some of the community partners like BikeNet, some nonprofit partners that have been around the community and have a pretty good connection to the community, not just for biking. But I would echo Councilor Newman and Councilor Vigil that everyone, I think, should hear it. And I think one of the ways we can do that, too, is by our boards and commissions that we're on. I'm part of the Traffic Safety Commission, and I know that group meets with city officials and also has a big voice to the community. And so I think that would be happy to take information and bring it up there. And I think some other councilors that are on relevant commissions and boards would do the same.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And one thought on this question also would just be businesses on that side of town, that business engagement. You've probably already thought about that, but I think sometimes, yeah, I'm thinking more of the community members, the people who live over there, but the businesses would be impacted too. So.
Great.
And I have just a couple comments. One, I'm just going to bring on behalf of some constituents who contacted me, and their concern is our historic pedestrian bridge over the railroad. And there was concern that this process could lead to alteration, elimination, et cetera, of our historic bridge. And I would like to display that or dispel that. Can you
Yes, Mayor.
address that?
Yes, I think, really, as we're looking at this study, our focus is on enhancing and adding to connectivity. So we certainly see that bridge as, a great existing asset as part of connectivity, and we really want to build on it. So not, eliminate something that does work well for connectivity, and that certainly has value just beyond the connectivity side.
Great value.
As well.
My second comment is, though I don't live on the west side, I am a strong advocate of this connectivity move. I think that the disconnect between the west and the east side are very evident when you look at the development as it's occurred in our city. And I think the increase in connection will help to increase the availability of amenities, development, essential services, all types of things, just by increasing that connectivity. And I think it's very important for the future of our city to get West Laramie connected so that we grow more evenly and that the amenities and things are more distributed throughout. So thank you for your work, and I really appreciate it. All right. Councillor Newman.
Just so you guys are aware, he has 5 more slides. He has more questions.
There are a couple more questions, yeah.
4, sorry.
I was about to send you off.
That's an agenda.
Yep. Yes, if you don't mind, yes, there are a couple more questions. Really, we're curious if there's any aspects of this project that could be contentious, and if so, why?
Councillor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, I don't know about contentious, but as we talked last night, there's been a lot of talk about walking paths and bicycle paths and whatnot. But as you stated and we've discussed in our goal setting, there are no grocery stores out there. We do need to make sure that public transportation is a big part of this, because maybe some student that lives over there and goes to Wyotech, or someone that doesn't have a driver's license, they're not going to, just because we have a nice walking path, they're still not going to walk to Safeway. So we need to make sure that we do have some of those joint ventures, as you had mentioned. That needs to be a big part of it, not just focusing on the bike paths and the biking, which I think is fantastic. We just want to make sure that's another mode of connectivity.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Actually, to be honest, Lockhart took it all, so I don't have anything for this. But because, I don't know if you're aware, I work at Wyotech, so listening to those students and their diets, because all they have is gas stations to buy their groceries from, because we do have a good portion of them who get dropped off and don't have vehicles, or they go to the other store there to where, they're not eating the best food, and I'm like, Safeway, and they're like, you walk that, and I'm just like, I'll drive, thanks. So that would be my comment.
Vice Mayor?
Something that, two things I could potentially see. I think there are certainly folks in West Laramie who like the quiet, like the things the way they are, and having connectivity would potentially mean more people coming over and kind of shaking up the status quo. And the other side of that would be, I mean, kind of in conjunction with that, I think similarly, there are some people over there who, don't, well, no, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that piece. I think that pretty well encompasses it.
Councilor Vigil.
Vice Mayor Richardson kind of said it all. I think, there can be contentious viewpoints with any type of change, and I want to be really respectful of that. There's a lot of families who have lived a lot of generations over in West Laramie, and so I just want to be respectful of kind of that cultural heritage too, and what the West Side has meant for them, especially in the quiet ways. And so, yeah, to be clear, why I'm very excited about this, I also want to honor that as well.
Councilor Shumway.
Thank you. Maybe in 20 years, everybody will know how to say my name.
I usually do.
I know. Thank you. I have noticed that there's housing developments for students that have shuttles. And I would suggest that WyoTech look into providing a shuttle for the WyoTech students. There's a whole lot more WyoTech students in housing than there are in the housing units in the north and in the east part of town that have shuttles provided for their residents.
We have one.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think the plan that you laid out for the communication over the next year, I think is really important. And I think what we've seen in this community is if that changes, then we should try to communicate that the most effective way we can. Other than that, I think it's all been said by the council members, but trying to stick to that plan and having as much public input or share outs, I think is going to be the most important in my mind, and my limited time here on council, but to explain to residents how this is beneficial and what's happening, and I think that will be great. Thanks.
Councilor Bowling.
Just piggybacking a little bit, thank you, Honorable Mayor, a little bit off of Councilor Freed. Obviously, the community engagement and stakeholder meeting and public meetings, understand how those can be different sometimes, but also at some point need to be the same thing, are incredibly important. I think something that is just something I would think about is that the proposed timeline for beginning those activities is immediate, right? We're in phase one right now. The first proposal for meetings, public meetings and stakeholder meetings is March. And it's just been my experience in the past that sometimes the active community engagement takes a lot longer than that. Getting different community members, different community groups, different stakeholders to buy into the idea and to then galvanize others in their community and then have people show up in the numbers that we really want sometimes takes a little bit longer. And so I would be curious as to if there's a plan or contingency perhaps, because a meeting in March could not be enough time. And then a meeting in June will come shortly thereafter. So it's just my personal experience that very often that is a much longer process than we anticipate it being. So thank you, Bill.
I think just my comment is the West Side is a very historical and rich neighborhood, and they are quite active in preservation and the designation of historical significance. They've engaged in that process with the National Registry. So I think that you'll get strong feedback where they'll want it to tie in historically, but not necessarily resistance.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. Next question, what types of solutions would you like to see evaluated? We've touched on these a little bit with the public transportation and transit, but I'm curious if there's others that maybe haven't been identified.
Council? Councilor Newman?
I think as long as we still, walking past, biking past, and then don't forget about the vehicles, because that is another one. I think sooner or later, we might have to explore other options of vehicles, because Snowy Range, the bigger that side gets, and I would hope that we respect to keep it quiet in some of the neighborhoods. But along Snowy Range, there's a whole bunch of empty lots that we could fill in businesses with. And then the solutions of just the businesses over there. If you drive from here to, I think it's the Shell station going out of town, you can count a bunch of empty lots that we could be putting, small hometown businesses in that would help enrich that neighborhood over there. And I live over there, so don't build next to me. That's what we're going to hear, though, right? And we have to still, and it kind of goes on, I think it's your next question, what should we know about those communities? They're tight-knit communities over there. Go to the west side and say that you're going to build an apartment complex and see what happens, right? So we have to make sure that with all this community engagement that we're really focusing on what the pros and cons are going to be for that side of town, right? Better streets, better water quality, or better water pressure, better sewer systems, items like that, and cleaning up the neighborhood. And what I mean by that is those empty lots. So we are, and Councilor Bowling, I think you're right too. This isn't going to be a year process. I think we've noticed that with some of the other things that we have talked about, to where we need to, maybe if it needs to be a year and a half, we need a contingency plan of, hey, the west side comes to us and said, have you thought about this? And it doesn't fit into what we've been talking about. We need another plan to kind of add some of that stuff in. So I kind of answered the rest of your questions, so I don't have to talk anymore.
Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Bill, kind of piggybacking on Councilor Newman. Exactly. Lots of vacant lots, but I've been trying to build a business out there for 3 years. And I finally got someone willing to work with me. So, and I kind of fashioned myself a people person and a good negotiator. I know a lot of people. I like to sell the why and how it's going to benefit. And so we're going to need a lot of good people talking to people about, hey, we'd like to do this with your property, and being able to make a budget, see the vision, because I can tell you it's not easy. And, it's frustrating, as many people that I know have felt pain with me. So it's going to be a team effort, not just you guys out there. I think we're all going to be having to step in, city staff and ourselves, to help see the vision. So thank you.
Councilor Doherty?
As I recall, there was a grocery store proposed many years ago that was squelched by the neighbors, like where 130 and 230 meet, or like there was some feelers going out, and I guess the owners decided it wasn't worth it. So that is worth considering.
Councilor Newman?
And then my last comment, Councilor Viho had a very good idea. Who doesn't like a good barbecue? So let's have some barbecues on the west side and in West Laramie, and counselors can show up. In March. Yeah.
It's a great
April.
summer
Yeah,
idea.
somewhere in there. Yeah. That was a good idea.
I have a couple comments, and I would say that our weather just starts to get nice in June. And prior to that, a lot of people stay inside. I don't start to see my neighbors until it warms up. And so for you to kind of, for your engagement time for your last one to be in June, that's kind of when our season starts. And the most beautiful time here where everybody's out, June, July, August. And it's beautiful in the evenings. So that'd be something to think about as far as maybe possibly adjusting to where you will reach people who are out of their homes, out at the parks, ready for a picnic. My second answer to your question, solutions, might be as you begin this work to dovetail with the Public Transit Authority. We had let the Transit Authority drop a number of years ago, and we have reinstituted that, and it's a joint venture between city and county commission. And so we're now developing that authority to move forward simultaneously to your doing this work. And so I think to dovetail with that, because as many of the counselors have said, we can't necessarily just focus on biking and walking. And if some of your actions include public transit, then I think that would have even a broader scope and impact on the community. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to, quickly reiterate again, and I think as the mayor said, that the consideration of expanding your community engagement timeline, but having DJNA and city staff have a booth at something like Freedom Has a Birthday, where you're going to talk to 800, 900 people in a day, that, it's thinking strategically about those opportunities. And again, March is going to be tough.
Councilor Newman.
The farmer's market would be another good one, because a lot of, whether they're parking on the west side or they're coming from the west side or West Laramie, I think they would have some really good insight after that walk to give some good information. So that would be another one I would say.
One last question. What else should we know about the communities? Yeah, you've told, but just in case, there's a little bit more.
Councilor, any comments to this question? Councilor Newman.
I'll just echo that we're going to get some pushback, and we have to be able to let them know the why, the infrastructure that we're putting in and what. So that's probably the biggest thing that I'm going to say about these communities is there's going to be pushback. And what I have seen from the most part is sometimes it's the ones that push back don't fully understand or don't understand the vision, and trying to get that out to them. We're not trying to come in and just change West Laramie or the west side. So just to enhance it.
Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, are you excited yet? As much as it might be hard, I do think that Laramie is a very active community, and providing more of these routes to get to and from, I think will be supported by a large portion of the community. And so I just appreciate you being here and listening to all this, and hopefully that forms some different decision-making processes. Or if you have questions, I know council or city staff is happy to work with you on that. But I think we all agree that it's really important, and this is something that would benefit these communities in our community. So however we can help, let us know. But I think it's exciting.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I'm really excited about this as well. I guess one thing that is maybe not about the communities that live there, but about Wyoming generally, we have a major brain drain, which means our young people leave the state for other places. So when thinking about, yes, how this impacts communities, definitely want to be talking to folks and understanding how we can best do this to meet needs and to kind of make it as smooth as possible. But also thinking about why people are leaving Laramie. And I think a big chunk of that are the amenities that we don't have, or that they're going elsewhere for. So being able to share and show we are building out infrastructure and paths and these roads to keep our young people here, I think is really important to be thinking about as well.
And I found in working with a number of contentious issues in going into the community toward town meetings, et cetera, community meetings, that it may start that way, but with true engagement and conversation, I find often we come to a consensus about something. And so I think it's about being engaged and reaching out as you've outlined. I really appreciate that, your emphasis on that. And I think that will go a long way in this community if they feel a genuineness. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
Now,
Council.
thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
You did have a number of communities out there to make public comments.
Yes. Online? Okay, I'll do the group first. Is there any public comment on this topic? Yes.
Yeah, I think I spoke to some of these people actually earlier this summer.
Up to the mic.
Sorry. My name is Evan Grendel again. I believe I actually spoke to some of these people when they were doing outreach last year. I'm doing an online permaculture design course through the Oregon State University, and my project is actually focusing on the territorial prison area where the bike path is actually at. And so one of the things I pinpointed in that whole course was that discussing with some of the territorial prison people that it's kind of a gray, iffy area about like how people are utilizing that bike path right now. So as far as like pushback and cooperation goes, I think that there would be a lot of encouragement, at least from the people that are operating the territorial prison, to make that more formal. And at least I don't think that there's many people that take that bike path that are worried about trespassing charges and whatnot. But there is the possibility of that. So the impact of the civilians using that more formally would be more useful. And at least from the scope of like when they were discussing 10, 20 years time scale, I think that maybe discussing things along the lines of like Laramie has to grow no matter what. So like, do we want more Grands or do we want more Sheridans and stuff like that? Because like, I think that large roads, I think, are the things that a lot of small town communities are afraid of. And so like Sheridan and like these smaller roads that are major communication ways between the city in general are, I think, a lot more acceptable for the urban population. And so like maybe a consideration for like a southern bypass that allows people from West Laramie to get to Walmart without having to get up to 75 miles an hour. Because if you ask me personally, if I can find a semi that's going 60, I'll stick behind that semi that's going 60, so I don't have to spend all that extra gas to just go that fast, to just get right off the interstate again. So I think that there might be an interesting selling point of like, okay, well, obviously there's going to be a hindrance or like an aversion to the people that are right on the edge of town, not wanting a Sheridan or a Grand to bust through their neighborhood. But if there was a southern bypass that we're able to increase access to some land that wasn't even really accessible before, that could also open up opportunities for businesses and other things in the 10, 20-year time period. So it's one of those things of like, if we're thinking about how the size of Laramie and what it's going to look like in 10, 20 years' time, where is Laramie going to grow? How is it going to look like? And maybe accepting that we are going to have to space out a little bit, and in the process of doing that, building a major road that allows some of that air to be alleviated would be a consideration. I'm not a civil planner or anything like that, but it's just something that, as I've been discussing with friends and family, like, oh yeah, this is something that, you know, as time goes on, might be something that will happen whether I wanted to or other people wanted to or not. So.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. Very thoughtful.
And I think you guys have a business card.
Are there any other comments? We'll take the one online. Good evening, Ms. Devine.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. My name's Linda Devine. Thank you for this really good discussion. I really appreciate it. This is just kind of a gentle reminder, and I spoke about it last week. The Snowy Range Flea Market is a licensed grocery store. They're small, but they are building. They're working really, really hard to bring in additional foods, but you know, they've got fresh meat from local ranchers. They're bringing in fresh produce and also dairy products. I would just ask council members to consider just dropping in there and visiting with them and letting them know, you know, you're supporting them, because I think if they were to be listening to this tonight, it might have been a little discouraging to them to hear folks saying that there's nothing over there. So just a gentle reminder that they are licensed. I don't have a dog in the fight. They're not my friends or anything. So I just, you know, I've been going in there, seeing them, just seeing how hard they're working. So that's all. Just kind of a gentle reminder for that. I really do appreciate this good discussion tonight, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devine, and we appreciate that reminder.
Thank you.
And with no further public comments, we can move on to our last work session, which is a review of council rules and procedures.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So for our presentation tonight, we wanted to just start you off, since this is really an opportunity for the council to have some discussion about possible changes to the rules of procedure that you would like to see. So this is to kind of give you an overview, why it was created, when it was created, and then kind of give you the different categories that are captured within the rules of procedure. One request that we received for you to maybe consider for changes, and then let you have your discussion. So with that, the City Council rules of procedure were first adopted, as far as I can find in my research, on December 7th of 2004. It was item number 4V on the consent agenda. It was revised, or has been revised as needed, to reflect best practices or additional needs that arise. It's used to maintain order and decorum for the City Council meetings, provides council with clear description of roles and responsibilities. The title of the rules of procedure have changed over time. Some of you that have been on council for a while, Councilor Shumway probably remembers that it used to be called the Code of Conduct. And then in 2021, the title was changed to the City Council Rules of Procedure. Part of that request was that these rules are used for more than just conduct. It's actually parliamentary procedure for the council. So we refer to the City Council Rules of Procedure before we refer to Robert's Rules of Order. So in cases where your rules of procedure are silent, then we refer back to the Robert's Rules of Order. The last time we updated this was February 6th of 2024 by Resolution 2024-16. The governing rules for meetings, we just kind of talked about that section, actually, that these apply before Robert's Rules of Order do. So it kind of takes precedence over that. This slide we'll come back to at the end of the slideshow because it kind of gives the different sections of the rules of procedure. So if there's something specific, it can maybe help guide your discussion a little bit. You can go step by step through these. The first article is the rules of procedure. Article 2 is the code of conduct, which includes roles and responsibilities, internal council conduct with city staff, council conduct with the public. And then we have Appendix A, which is the boards and commission procedure for vacancies, Appendix B, which is council meeting procedures, and Appendix C, guidelines for addressing the council. So the one request that we did receive from council was from Councilor Newman, who requested to maybe consider the rules or consider adding rules to allow the public to comment on consent agenda items. So if Councilor Newman would like to expand on that, Mayor, that'd be fine. I did include 2 sections of the rules of procedure that I could see maybe being addressed by this or for this topic. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you for now, and then we have a few more slides.
Thank you. And then I also have an addition that I've written up, but I did not submit, but I'm prepared to read it out. Councilor Bowling, do you also have something?
Something that I wanted to address.
Okay.
And if I missed the opportunity to formally submit it, then I apologize. Thank you, Mayor.
I apologize, too. Councilor Newman, would you like to start?
Sure. I have another one too that I didn't send that I thought afterwards. I think, so the whole transparency thing, I think this would help. If you look at the draft agenda that we got, number 4, public comment on non-agenda items, we could change that to public comment on non-agenda items and consent agenda and leave it at consent agenda. And after I sent city clerk the email of, hey, I think we should change this, this could, the raise issue could have stayed on consent agenda. It still would have passed, and we wouldn't have to change the agenda. The public can still come up, give their 3-minute speech of why this is, but then because it is before considering changes, then if we need to pull something because 30 people show up, then we can. So it's something that I think it would be super easy to do. We can still keep the same rules that we have now of, because the first public comment, you have to be in person. We can still keep that to where the Zoom ones are still at the end of it. That way we don't have to combat the craziness that we have had to in the past. But I think just adding simple language, if you want to talk about the consent agenda, we can do that after roll call. And then if we need to pull something, then we can afterwards. So that was my thinking.
Okay. So with that said, are there any comments on Councilor Newman's suggestion? Councilor O'Doherty?
I think it's a great idea.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you for bringing it forward. Counselor Newman, and I think in concept, I like it. I would suggest a tweak to that a bit, just because I'm a little concerned that allowing people to comment, and we're giving people 3 minutes, and then we get all of these people coming up to comment on the consent agenda item that they'd like to move off, might take time. And I would propose to amend that to say that the public just come up and request an item be moved, which I think would allow, I think most of us, if someone were like, we want this off of there, would say, let's move that off. And then the time isn't being used for comment after comment after comment.
Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I would defer to Councilor Newman for response to the Vice Mayor, and then I can go, please. Thank you.
Councilor Newman.
I thought that too. Well, what if we don't pull it? Then they're gonna leave it at, right? Because nobody would have pulled the raise other than me. After talking to everybody, nobody would have pulled it, right? So if they didn't have their chance to talk, then it still doesn't get pulled, then they don't. But then, let's say we don't pull it after, or we pull it, they still get their 3 minutes. So whether they talk in the beginning of the meeting or we pull it and then they talk then, because if we can hash it out, they tell us, this is why we think you should pull it, and then nobody does, they're gonna leave upset. Or we let them talk for their 3 minutes, we hash it, they like hash it out between them, and they're like, oh, we don't have to pull it. So either way, it doesn't matter, they're gonna get their 3 minutes, whether we pull it, or I still like it in the beginning, so either way, but. Yeah.
Okay, order. Councilor Bowling, do you wish to go?
Yeah, I'm again throwing cake at the wall. I don't know if this is possible, but I do think in the spirit of transparency, I agree it's a really good idea. I think I understand that the concern from the Vice Mayor be about compromising council time and the ability to conduct our business.
Right.
Is there a alternative in which, if we're going to allow public comment on consent agenda items, that the number of speakers be capped?
It is.
And it's capped currently.
30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay.
10 people.
So,
And would that be on all items? And they could address
You get the way,
any of the items on the consent agenda? I'm out of order, I'm sorry.
if I'm right, they can't come up more than once, right? So they get 3 minutes. So we would have 10 people who could talk, would be my, if I read it right, which is why I said we should put it there. If I'm reading that wrong, then.
Yeah, if
Right, I don't, yeah.
if it's 30 minutes total, that isn't of a concern to me. If it's 30 minutes per item,
No.
that is a different
I
story.
think they only get
No,
one time.
it's 30 total.
Yeah, because they get 3 minutes no matter
Thank you,
what.
Mayor.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's a great idea, Councilor Newman, to bring forth, and I know we've heard from some folks in the community that they'd want this. I guess I also echo Mike's concerns, and after the WHAM conference, I think every municipality, or almost all of them, use a consent agenda to be efficient. And so I can see this might not be the finished product, but at least moving something in like this, and if we notice every council meeting gets bogged down, or people are requesting that we take tons of things off and now we're creating more work for the city staff, then maybe we revisit it and we can revise it. But I do think at least walking away with something that allows public comment, and it might not be the shiniest tool or whatever, but it's a start. And if we can hash out maybe better practices, and that's great, but I think it's a great idea.
Councilor Vice Mayor Richardson.
And I just want to respond to the comment that you were the only person who would have taken it off. I don't actually, I would have taken it off, but I had been told that you were. Okay. So I think we are all responsive to community. And if we're taking it off anyway from a request, then then it becomes public comment time, right? So that public comment will still be available to all those folks. We just won't have the 30 minutes ahead of time where they comment on us wanting to take it off and then comment on the issue. So it's like doubly comment in my mind. And I do really want to allow an opportunity for the public to say, hey, council, will you please consider taking this off?
Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that we should, upon request, move something that the public asks us for from consent to the regular meeting. And the reason is because if we don't have the opportunity to talk. They do, but we don't, because it's consent.
I will say that the mayor and I, when we did the agenda for that, had considered moving it, but the mayor informed me that you were going to pull that. So I think there were a number of people who were willing to do that because the public were asking for it. And I guess my alternative is, in the comment that we received that is motivating this, it was commented that the public often get to see our agenda during the work sessions that we're going to do next week. And then, secondly, when the agenda is published on a Friday, an individual has Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday morning to write council at City of Laramie, please remove this, can you please move this? And I believe most of us would respond to that. So I'm just wondering, and as Councilor Freed said, maybe it goes very smoothly and it hardly happens. But I'm looking at sometimes when there are 10 things on the agenda, could it be that people would target various things? Could it be disruptive, more disruptive than it is transparent and informative? I'm just asking to think about that. I think, are there other ways? But I think when people ask us about an item, I don't know of a time that we have not pulled it and left it on a consent agenda and ignored the public. Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So if we pull something off the consent agenda and put it on the agenda at that meeting, that's what this is proposing. To Councilor Shumway's comment, then we can speak about it. We can provide transparency. We can have conversations here. I guess being a new council member, if someone really wants to pull cemetery deeds or something off of the consent agenda and have it go on a regular agenda, that might never happen. But I feel like at that point, I have no context and we don't have Nancy's nice work preparing us for it necessarily. And so I guess I just don't know what that looks like. Obviously, I feel like what this would be used for are contentious items that some of the community perceive to be contentious. So I bet we'll have some context and understanding if they want to get pulled. But just looking at the consent agenda for next week, some of these things, if they were to be put on the agenda and we had to stand for questions or comments, I don't know if I would be prepared, is my only thought.
Councilor Newman.
Two things. It was my understanding, so if other people were going to pull it, I apologize, but when I talked to the mayor at the time, it was suggested that if somebody was going to do it, that I was the only one that communicated that. So if other people were going to, I apologize. Secondly, I know we received an email from the public about this, and I will make it known that nor have I talked to Brett Glass about this item, and I sent it to the city manager, or the city clerk before he sent us an email. So this is something that I wanted to do before even the public did. But we did get an email about this, putting it out there to the public, but I had requested this before that email was sent, nor have I ever talked to Brett Glass about this.
City Clerk.
Mayor, I just wanted to make you aware that the city manager has her hand raised on Zoom.
Thank you. If you can bring her in.
Thank you, Council. First of all, I want to apologize for not being there in person tonight. I'm not feeling very well, so I chose to attend from Zoom at home. I wanted to suggest that certainly, as you've said, we've had members of the public either submit written requests asking for items to be moved from consent to the regular agenda, both in writing prior to the meeting and also at pre-council. This has happened many, many times. It is true that council have, I can't think of an instance where the council has not been receptive to that request to move items from consent to regular agenda. And while I think it makes sense to maybe create space on the agenda where that request can be made verbally on the evening of the meeting if folks are unable to submit it prior to, I would also suggest that the reason the consent agenda is in existence is to pass those items in a single motion that is not discussed, and that's an efficiency issue. When moved to regular agenda, then each item being moved separately allows for the public to comment at that time. So I guess what I would maybe suggest you contemplate more deeply is if you allow comment at the beginning to request the movement of those items and then maybe 3-minute comment to sort of debate them then you're actually creating 2 opportunities for debate on a particular item, even capped at 30 minutes. It does seem redundant, I would offer, and all of that discussion would rightly occur on the regular agenda. So if we go that way, I guess my question to you would be then why continue to have a consent and a regular agenda, if that makes sense?
Comments, Council? Councilor Shumway.
I love the consent agenda. I think that it's very rare that we move something from consent. Let's say there's 30 items on consent and they pull one. That's better than having 30 consent moved to the regular agenda. That would take us forever. So I like it when it's requested to move it to the regular agenda, and I don't think that will be very, we take up much more of our time.
Can I clarify? Are you saying that it be requested from the floor, or that they write us and ask the council to remove it, which we always do?
Your Honor, once it's requested, I think that the council should then make the motion to move it from consent to the regular. It can't be moved by the public, so it has to be done by one or more of us to move it from consent to the regular agenda.
Yes, sir. So you're talking about the request coming from the floor and that we expand the initial public comment on non-agenda items.
If there is,
or
council will make that motion, then it's moved.
Okay.
But if not, then we move on with
right.
it as a consent item.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, because I may have lost this train of thought here, City Manager had suggested putting something on the agenda, a space on the agenda that allows the public to come forth to request that. Am I correct with that, City Manager, as an option?
Yes, that would be one option. I think that would then be in your rules of procedure, and then the clerk would just create a point for that on the agenda. And if Nancy has anything to add, she's welcome to.
So follow up with that. So then
By
it
the
would
way.
go on the agenda. Let's say Nancy's a community member. She comes up and she says, hey, I'm really concerned about this. Can you move it to whatever? I would then assume that one of us can then say, I move to move whatever to the consent agenda without having the 3-minute discussion as to why. Correct?
Yes, if that's to me, Mayor, through you, that's sort of what I had envisioned. Right now, you have that section that says changes to the agenda. Maybe just getting to Councilor Newman's suggestion, placing there any requests from the floor, as you've said, Councilor Richardson.
So
Mayor.
that would be, are there any requests from the floor on the consent agenda?
I think it would be important, Mayor, as the city attorney and I look at it, we'll try to make sure craft clear language, so it's very specific, so the public will know exactly what they can request at that time.
I would like to clean it up where it's not mushed together with comments on non-agenda items, that we do comments on non-agenda items, and then just before the vice mayor would set that agenda, we would make that request. Councilor Newman.
I don't have a problem with doing that. The only thing, if we make it like, it would be 1.5 on here, I would want to open it up to Zoom then. If we're gonna, the whole reason why I put it there is so it had to be here. But if we're gonna split it up, I think to be fair, it has to be open to Zoom too. So that would be my only, but I'm okay with them having the opportunity to pull them. I'm okay with that. That was the whole reason of the public comment, was to, there are times that, I'll tell you, there are times that I got an email after saying, why didn't you pull this? Well, I didn't know. Nobody asked me to, right? So that was the whole reason to, and I had nothing to fall back on, because they said, well, we can't talk about consent agenda. So if we make it a whole separate line item, I'm totally fine with it. It needs to be opened up to Zoom, though.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councilor Newman, and I think based on the city manager's input, and city clerk, feel free to jump into with your experience. But I would really like to see that under number 4 and have something that's very specific, kind of like our city clerk has provided. Are there any comments to move a specific consent agenda item onto the regular agenda, and that's it? And so I don't know if it's possible to have that not be 3 minutes, but you can state one thing, and it's just one
thing.
And I'm sure you can look at that with our city attorney, but that would be, I guess, my thought. And I think if we include Zoom and in person, we could get through that fast.
And then Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is just to piggyback off of Councilor Freed, but if the precedent also is that when a single member of the public requests that, almost immediately a member of the council makes that motion, then that actually might speed things up pretty quickly if it's a particularly contentious item.
Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Honor. Remember, this is a business meeting, and should we find that someone is just trying to be difficult and pull 30 items off of consent onto the regular agenda, they don't do that, we do that. So we make the decision whether or not an item or several items will be moved from consent to the regular agenda, and then we order that. But that's our decision in the way I see this business, the business meeting being run.
So Mayor, if I could?
Yes,
Do you
City
mind if I
Clerk.
follow up to that?
No, City Clerk, please.
I might suggest that the language contain at the council discretion, it would be added to the regular, an item may be considered to be moved to the regular agenda at the council discretion, something like that. We can wordsmith it.
Something that limits it.
Yeah.
Counselor Newman?
So they both took what I was going to say, and then the city clerk did as well. I wouldn't make the motion right then because that would be the next thing that we have to do. But if we could acknowledge, so there isn't a line of 30 people wanting to pull the same, 2 or 3 items. One of the counselors, and I don't know how our rules and procedures would allow it, we'd have to modify them a little bit, but say, I'll pull that one. So then we don't have 30 people coming up here. But the Counselor Shumway stole the second part of it. It has to be our discretion though, right? I'm probably not gonna pull vouchers or cemetery deeds or something to that effect, right? So, and I wanted to make sure that was clear in that language as well, that even if they request it, we don't have to pull it. Because I'm not pulling everything off the consent agenda. Not doing it.
And I don't want to open up a situation where it turns into chaos. I think it should be very clean, state the item, and that's it. And I'm looking at our current agenda, and this one that I thought about after Tom Mattamore's comments tonight, item 9F, license under the university for, and I had to ask, where is this street? It's Willett. It's exactly what he's talking about. Now, they're going to bore, and it won't be tearing up the street. It'll be an underground bore. But I had to ask that because if they were going to tear up the street, then I wanted it to be on the regular agenda. So the vice mayor and I thought about that today.
That was on my list of
Nah. Councilor O'Doherty?
It seems like the most logical thing is, because we're talking about consideration of changes in the agenda. So if you just do, are there any changes, and then you ask for public comment.
Yes.
And then if any member of the public points out something, then we could pull it or not. Don't you think?
That's why it has to be above.
Well, I mean, within it. Consideration, because it's called consideration of changes. So are there any other considerations of changes in the agenda? And then you open it up to public comment, and that would be the easiest place, because then it would be, make it a quick, 30-second. No, but public comment about the agenda, and then you set the agenda. I think that's the most logical place for it to keep it from getting out of hand.
I think that's a logical place, but I think we should go with the city clerk and the county attorney to phrase it in a way that contains it. That if you want to pull something from the consent agenda for discussion, then you just state the item, and then that's it. And then it goes to vote.
So Mayor, what I kind of picture in my mind with you talking about this specific placement would be 5A being the public opportunity, 5B being the council opportunity to make that request. And it only takes one counselor, according to our current rules of procedure, with no second, to move that to the regular agenda, but that would also give us an opportunity to capture that in the minutes as well. And then we'd move to C, being the motion to change the agenda as follows, and then D would be to set the agenda as changed.
Yes.
Does that sound approximately right?
Yes. Councilor Newman.
Whatever makes it easier for you. That's how I would say it. It sounds like all of us on council are in agreement that something should be done. So whatever makes it easier that you and the city attorney can come up with, I think is probably the best route. That way we can move on to the other 3 things that we have.
Right now.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor
And I'm just
Richardson.
going to extend it a second longer to say, just as a reminder, to the point of what we were just talking about with the license of University of Wyoming, we don't necessarily have to take that off the consent agenda, but the mayor often will just do a quick little update to the audience so that they can get a better sense of what it is and not be like, wow, what's going on? And then just thank you, Councilor Newman, for thinking of this and bringing it forward. I appreciate it.
And I just want to say that I don't have any problem with this part of it being available for Zoom comment, that our intention of the public comment was when we were under attack, that by persons saying really inappropriate things, we did not think they'd want to wait through a meeting to say that again. So it was one of our ways of starting the meeting clean without chaos. And so I don't have any problem with that being part of Zoom. Okay. So that's decided, right? Next. Shall I go? Or Will? I mean, Councilor Bowling, would you? Did you want to bring your suggestion up?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I can be quick. I think this would go back to our very first meeting as a new 25 council. And I think city clerk, this would maybe most apply to Article 2, 1.03, page 10. That if we could look at a longer process for the selection of boards and commissions that involved council discussion, or an opportunity to have that discussion at a work session or make it part of an agenda item at a retreat. Just reiterating the idea that it's a very quick process, understanding that city business needs to happen quickly, and we don't want to prevent those wheels from turning, but I think the opportunity for discussion amongst colleagues might illuminate opportunities that we might not have otherwise considered.
May I just say something? One of the considerations is that most, if not all, the boards and commissions and committees want to get started in January, whether they wind up meeting yearly, quarterly, or monthly. And so there's a lot of pressure there. I'm just wondering, those who have served on boards and commissions, I don't think necessarily need as much time. I'm curious whether your suggestion is for all council members or for newly electeds. And
thank you, Mayor. I'm not exactly sure. I just know that it felt, although I felt prepared, it also did feel like something that happened very quickly. I think the larger point I'm trying to make is that I think conversation and dialogue amongst this group that works very closely together, I value that greatly. And I think that that might better suit us for service towards the city. If that pushes council attendance at one of those meetings back 1 week or so, I guess maybe we could discuss a contingency around that, but I would go to Councilor Newman, please.
Counselor Newman?
And that's what I was going to get at with that, because I figured you were going to bring this up, and I knew it was something that maybe we could talk about during the boards and commission review, or review as well, like a different way to do that. I was talking to the vice mayor after that meeting, and it felt rushed when we did it as well. And I was a new council member, and actually there was a lot of us that were kind of new during that time. And it was like, well, I don't necessarily understand the process. And then afterwards, it was like, oh, that was rushed, and what boards did I get again? And what boards did you get? And how can I help you? And how can you help me kind of thing. So I would like to not see that on the very first meeting after we do picking the mayor and vice mayor and the other business that we did, to where maybe we push that to its own work session / special meeting the following week. That's all we do, to where we can have some discussion of, and I think the discussion that would have helped me was, this is what this board has been focusing on from the liaisons prior, to where here's what they've been focused on, here were their goals. And I know that's stuff that we can communicate beforehand. Once again, the transparency part of it, let's have some of that talk, to where it just felt super rushed to me, and I didn't like it as well. This time it felt super rushed to me. I still don't like it. So.
Counselor Shumway.
I think we've had some good discussion on this. A couple of things. Should we move it to the second meeting, a work session? We'd also need to have a special meeting so that we can make those appointments. And if not, and it doesn't seem like that we, the other option, and the other option is probably not as promising, and that is during new council orientation, cover boards and commissions. But I think that what Councilor Bowling is asking for is the input from all the city council members to kind of guide and direct and say, this is what's expected, this is what this focus is on. So if we could move it to the first work session with a special meeting, I think that would cover everything.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had two things I wanted to share with the council. During WAM, we did ask Casper what their process is for boards and commission selection. Whether you like this or not, we thought we'd share it with you. They said their process, being a city manager form of government as well, the mayor actually sets the board and commission liaison positions. The council members are given an opportunity to, submit a list of boards they would prefer, and then the city manager and the mayor meet together, and then he brings back appointments to the council. So we thought we'd share that with you. Didn't know if you would prefer that method, but thought we'd share that. The second thing that I would ask you to consider is how many board and commission meetings you attended within that first week after that first meeting. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. So in my mind, I would say that you might want to consider some kind of provision for someone to attend those meetings up to the appointment, because you will have some meetings that will occur right away in January.
I'm just curious, if boards and commissions and committees knew that our selections were going to be at the second meeting, maybe they would start then and not start before we do that. No?
So we've...
Vice Mayor.
Assistant City Manager, did you have something you wanted to say before I speak up?
Thanks, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor. The concern is, and it's already been said, about the amount of business that's happening. And although you may say we're just moving it to the second meeting. There's a number of boards and commissions that are operating under a time schedule, including the Planning Commission that may have time-sensitive items that are coming with legislation that may pass this year that requires tighter timelines. Plus, I know for a fact the Park Street and Rec Advisory Board is under time crunch to get the Albany County Rec Board grants listened to and prioritized. I just think there's some real misconception about the amount of work. Plus, we come off of the holidays, and it's really hard to have more time off when you're struggling with time through the holidays to get to start it up in January. And if we take off some more time, I'm just concerned about what that implication might mean.
And so my original question, sorry.
I was just going to say that the 3 that I did attend within 4 days of being sworn in were critical. They were absolutely critical. So.
Thank you.
I had Councilor Newman. Okay.
Oh, I haven't gone yet.
Vice Mayor?
Is there a reason, or could it be that first meeting where we get sworn in and choose mayor, vice mayor, isn't extended to have that conversation? And then, do we have to have it as like a regular agenda voting meeting, or could that be shifted for that first?
We have to vote on appointments.
Well, okay, so sorry. Let me reframe that. So vote on a paper, have it be that voting meeting, but not have additional agenda items on that date, so that we are strictly focused on voting and our boards and commissions on the first meeting.
I would defer to the city manager due to the public business that may come up and need to be voted on as soon as possible. But I would defer to her for more information on that.
Councilor Newman, you have an answer?
So all we would have to do is suspend the rules. So if we could suspend the rules when that action item comes up, then we can have open discussion. But the way it would be now, each person would have 2 minutes or 5 minutes to talk, so you get a total of 10 minutes. But if, when that action item comes up, we have an agenda item before that suspends the rules to where now it's more a work session than an actual voting on topic, then we could extend that meeting and have the conversations that I think Councilor Bowling and I were kind of discussing. So that, as long as it was an action item that we suspend the rules, then it can be an open work session, and then go back to the rules and then vote on whatever we agree on during that. But that would be the easiest way if we still wanted to do it. Because I was looking at the agenda for the first meeting, there were items that were on that agenda that we needed to approve that night, just like right, so it had to be done. So if we suspend the rules, if I'm reading Robert's rules and our procedures right, we suspend the rules, have a quote-unquote work session within our meeting, that just means that we can talk more than two times, and then go back to the rules, vote on it, then it should be okay.
So here's another thought. Okay. If we have the Tuesday meeting,
I thought about Wednesday.
and then a Wednesday special meeting for the boards and commissions.
Yeah, depending upon where that lands, Mayor and Council, with your Civil Service Commission meeting, you would have already missed that meeting because of the way it landed this year. On some years, maybe it's not going to be that fast of a turnaround, but because it was the second Wednesday of the month, it did end up that fast this year.
We do know who's going to represent, but at the first meeting, you would know who the mayor was.
You are correct on that one.
And then that mayor could go to that meeting, and then the boards and commissions could be done the following day at a special meeting where it starts with work session and goes into special session to select and then vote.
It would just be another payment to us.
Huh?
It would be another payment to us as well.
Point of order.
Yes.
people are talking. We have a mayor who's supposed to be running the meeting. We shouldn't be just throwing conversation around. So please be respectful of the mayor.
They're doing pretty good, I thought.
She's still online, Mayor. I don't see her hand.
Other discussion? Counselor Freed?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think we all are in agreement that we should try to find a way to get some time in there, and I don't know if that means I feel like we could do something on Wednesday, potentially, that you just brought up, Mayor, and knowing that there might be boards that meet on Wednesday, and those are tight, and that's an obligation of the elected mayor to then provide some representation, whether it's the mayor's responsibility or delegated to someone on council. I think there's probably only a few. I know I met Wednesday right after, and it was at 6 p.m. So I don't know if there's an opportunity, and I know we're going to, who knows how much time we're going to spend on this, but I would reiterate, I didn't want to step on anyone's toes walking in on my first day. If someone really wanted a commission who was an existing council member, and I took it, or start off that way. And so, or if there's an opportunity to do an informal session before we get sworn in, where the city manager or city staff can just have us all meet, and it's not a formal meeting, but they just describe what boards and commissions are, duties and responsibilities, and that way you get a sense, kind of like we had a session at the Municipal Operations Building where we learned about the new incoming representatives and heard them talk about topics. I think that could also be helpful. Again, that goes into city's time in December potentially, or early January, but I think there's some options. Thanks.
Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with about everything here, but what if you have your inauguration, you have your first meeting, and if you're going to have a second meeting, say that Wednesday, but there's already going to be a board meeting, what about we discuss any meetings that are coming up, and then we get volunteers from, say, hey, I'll do that one and I'll do that one before we actually have to vote on it, so we can take the time and not be rushed. Just like I didn't know if I was going to make my first meeting, and you volunteered to help me out. I mean, I'm sure the Planning Commission would have been A-okay with that if they were given notice that we don't have the signed one, but so-and-so is going to be attending that until we vote in 2 days or what have you. Thank you.
Councilor Vigil?
I had a similar kind of thought as Councilor Lockhart too, and even, you know, I don't want to create inconsistency for our boards and commissions, so I want to be cognizant of that. But I'm just wondering if, let's say nothing change, we don't change anything, and then we're like 2 or 3 months into our appointments, and I say, hey, Councilor Freed, it sounds like you're really interested in one of my commissions. It sounds like you've made some really good connections with some of the folks on there. Would you want to trade me? Or, again, I think there's some flaws in that thinking, but I'm just wondering if if we are so locked in, once we're locked in, that there's no room. Okay.
You are not locked in. And if any time there's a conflict with time, a conflict with personalities, you just feel like this is not what I thought, and you are not locked in. So that is open for negotiation, and then we put that out to council. Council determines who might want to do that. We've done that in the past, where we've switched, we've covered, so we support one another, but you're not locked in. Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you. Sorry. The one thing I just want to say that's giving me pause that some folks brought up, I don't remember who, is just that if we do hold that special session, it is additional payment to us. And if it's something that we all think that we can get accomplished on that Tuesday, I think my preference would be to do that. But if that feels really overwhelming and like we're just trying to squeeze it all in, then I also am A-okay to go the other route if it feels like it's needed, and then we do the other pay, so.
Counselor Newman?
Nancy, can we decide not to get paid for that? Like if we had a Wednesday meeting, could we decide the council doesn't get paid? Because I haven't seen anything in the bylaws or procedures about that. Can we call a special meeting without taking payment?
I know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head statutorily.
There's a lot.
What's required, yeah, that you're paid for every regular meeting and special meeting. You don't, yeah, you can, yeah, you're right. They did pass that last year, that you can, Councilor Richardson, Mayor, to council. Last year, the legislature passed a law that does say that you can forego your compensation. Thank you for that. So you could put within your rules of procedure that you want to set a work session and a special meeting and have it be an uncompensated meeting.
Why?
The state legislature made that suggestion, thinking that councils, mayors, and vice mayors would refuse to take payment the entire year, not just for one session. So I think it would be up to the individual council member whether they would be paid for a meeting that they attend or not.
Councilor O'Doherty?
Could we just simplify this? It's 20 till 9. Could we just simplify this by saying what meetings meet the first week, first 2 weeks maybe, and then the mayor could ask who's interested in that, and as long as it's fewer than quorum, everybody can go to that, be a liaison to that meeting, and then have a work session the first work session of January to nail down who's going to stay in those, rather than having another meeting which is going to conflict with a couple of the meetings, because you have meetings the Wednesday after. So, this place is booked up all the time. So just throwing in another meeting makes it trying to balance all those boards and commissions. So what if we just said, who's interested? Airport board's meeting tomorrow. Who's interested? And then a couple people, or, up to 4. If more than 4, then it would just be the priority. And then would that just be a simpler thing to do? And I think we should find a way to move on because we still have.
I think that Councilor Freed had some salient remarks, and that is, in that first session, the mayor and the vice mayor are elected. We will know in advance what meetings are coming up. The mayor and the vice mayor can plug into those or ask for volunteers as needed. And then in the second week, we have time to go over it and to really spend a session time doing it in the second week. Assistant City Manager.
Honorable Mayor, if I might add to this conversation, keep in mind that we've got 2 years to figure this out. And, it might be worth it to allow a couple of the interested council members and city staff to come together, put their heads together, and really develop something. I appreciate the hard work that you guys have done tonight, but we can certainly come up with a way to figure this out.
Session coming up about this that we could talk about.
Okay, next, here's my suggestion, and it's item 1.03. Boards and commissions, liaisons, elections, seating at rostrum. So I go all the way down to in between 103D and 103E. And so what I'm writing is, and this is just an example, and city clerk and the county attorney will clean it up. And we've all talked about this. Council members are expected to attend their boards and commissions meetings. Should a council member be unable to attend a meeting, the counselor should try to find another counselor who can attend. Should the council member be unable to find a substitute, the counselor should notify both the chair of that committee and city clerk in writing via email. Should a council member encounter circumstances in which there is a conflict to regular attendance, the counselor should notify the mayor and the city clerk so that either a temporary or permanent replacement can be established.
Okay.
I'll send that to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mayor. Let's see.
Counselor Newman?
Oh, I just flipped the page. The second one that I was going to discuss is one that the mayor and I have discussed. However, it looks like staff's making the recommendation, so I'm going to shut up and let Nancy talk.
Okay, so no. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. So the first section that I would bring to your attention is in Article 1, Rules of Procedure, Rule 1, under meetings and web conferencing. Each member of the council shall be limited to not more than 5 times annually during which web conferencing attendance may be utilized, unless the majority of council vote to allow additional participation by these means with the possibility of no compensation. So since COVID, this section hasn't been strictly enforced. So we wanted to bring that to your attention to see if this is something that council would like to continue as is and have us start to follow up with that more on a regular basis. So that's the reason for bringing this section to your attention.
Council members, discussion? Councilor Newman.
This is exactly what the mayor and I have discussed a couple times. And then we talked about the 5 times, maybe that's too low. But then looking back, that's how it's been written, so I was okay with it. But the part that I would kind of caution, the possibility of no compensation, that should be voted on. Because I think the way it's written now, the mayor decides that, if I remember right. I think this is in our procedures, but there is another ordinance that passed that said the mayor gets to vote on it, whether they get paid or not. If I remember right, I could be wrong.
I'm not remembering that off the top of my head, but I can certainly follow up
But I
with that.
think during that vote, it should be vote yes or no whether or not they can get paid. Because some of us, Vice Mayor, for instance, goes to Cheyenne a lot. I'm not going to say she has to drive back just so she can, attend a meeting if she's doing other work, right? And I know a lot of us travel too. I'm going to tell you I'm going to miss some meetings because of my grandfather back home, and I still want to be able to zoom in and participate. Whether I get paid, I don't care, as long as I can still participate, but just having that opportunity. But I don't want it abused like it has been in the past.
Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't think we necessarily need to determine what these are tonight, but perhaps there's space to think about what like an excused absence would look like, so that it's a little more laid out, and maybe those could be proposed sometime instead of trying to figure them out on the fly right now like we did the last thing.
And what? We have 40 meetings a year? 40, 44?
I just looked at the attendance sheet. I want to say it was 52 this last year.
We didn't even
had-
have a week off?
We had some additional work sessions, if you remember, during budget sessions.
Oh, yeah.
So Tuesday and Wednesday meetings.
I just wonder, is the 5? It just seems out of an entire year, it's not an awful lot of time for people with lives going on. I don't want it, I'm thinking grandpa's in Kansas, I'm thinking legislature, I'm thinking National League of Cities, I'm thinking stuff like that, illness. So does that come into excused absence? Councilor Newman?
Well, I think that goes along with if we, and this, I'll propose a work session about this then, but where we sit down and discuss what an excuse could be, and have that, it's no different than a job, right? You get 5 days vacation usually in a job, you can kind of say the same thing, but if we have an excuse and it fits in that, and council still wants to vote, no, you're not getting paid, you're not getting paid, right? But I think having that, here's the 10 things that are excused, and I'm just using that as an example. If that's in it, I'm pretty sure council's going to be like, oh yeah, let's allow that. I think this stops what has happened in my previous 2 years on council of people zooming in and not participating. And that was what the mayor and I first discussed was when you're on Zoom, you don't participate as much as you would be here. And maybe that would stop some of that. But if you're sick, yeah, stay home, zoom in, you can get paid. If you're, week of the WHAM or anything like that should be paid because you're doing other stuff for the city. So if we can have a work session on, here's the excuse things to put into this, because once again, it doesn't have to be passed tonight because we can't make a motion.
Point of clarification, Nancy. When it talks about the 5 meetings, are these regular voting meetings? Or does it also include work sessions? Is it all meetings?
All meetings.
So 5 all meetings?
Correct.
Or lose compensation?
Possibility.
Possibility.
My understanding is you can be excused for 5 meetings and still be compensated. And these are meetings that are compensated. So if it's if a person has to attend, for example, a WHAM board meeting and does not zoom in, they won't be compensated. No. They did not attend by Zoom.
Correct. Vice Mayor?
If Councilor Newman is amiable to it, I wonder if staff, just understanding what we're talking about and what we're kind of sussing out as what would be kind of excused, what would be not, could put something together that kind of outlines these ideas. I don't know if we need a full work session on it, but if there was something put together that we could then look at, vote on, add, subtract just a little bit, that seems like it might be helpful.
City Manager, sorry, Mayor.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be happy to meet with the city attorney and city managers and see if we can put together a list of acceptable excused absences.
And maybe with Patty and HR.
Absolutely, yeah. and then just renumbering after. Thank you. So again, it's just to add consideration of future work session topics in the first article, and then changes to the agenda, just shoring that up.
Thank you.
You've already done the next steps. So, so we've had our discussion. What I would expect from this point would be on the February 21st meeting. We'll try to get that resolution before you to change your rules of procedure and put into that what we've discussed today. So I would just look forward to that. And if you need anything else, please let us know.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. All right, so moving on. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Huh? Oh, on this agenda item. Good evening, Nancy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I figured out what the problem was with my camera last time and got it fixed. I have two things on this rules of council, and the first is, I will read to you. Written materials and other items must be submitted 6 days in advance of the meeting, sooner if there are a holiday prior to the meeting, in order that copies may be included with the agenda and given to the council an opportunity to review the material in advance of the appearance. The agenda only comes out 5 days before the meeting, so it's really hard to know when and what to submit, and I think that needs to be changed. The second item I'm thinking about is last year the Traffic Safety Commission worked for several months on the speed reduction, and that's water under the bridge now. But when it came time for council discussion, we got 3 minutes. I think when a commission or a board works on something like that and it comes before council, that even though we cannot speak as a commission because of open meeting laws, we should still be allowed to have the time to present, like the city manager does, the city clerk does, the public works do, the engineers do, the parks and recreation staff members do. If we're going to respect boards and commissions, I think something like that, a 10-minute presentation should be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. It's appreciated. Councilor O'Doherty.
I went to the Community Juvenile Services Board meeting that we discovered was an active board that was created by the county, and it involves justice-involved youth, so whether it's a city offense in the city or the county, so that there's diversion for all of the juveniles. And I just want to say Heather, whose last name I forgot, who's Weissman or something. Anyway, she was able to get a grant from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Only 2 of those grants went out nationally, and she was able to bring in money for the juvenile drug treatment enhancement grant. So they have 3 programs here, so that was really exciting. And they're working on a compilation of all of the agencies in town that help youth. And so it's not just things like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, but also like the dance center and all this stuff that may have a special thing for, like they may have special rates or something that they can offer to justice-involved youth. I just learned that term. And then I was supposed to go to the yeah, now I can't even talk. The territorial prison board meeting yesterday, and I could not find them because I didn't do my homework in advance, and apparently they don't meet at the prison. They meet somewhere else. So I will do better next time. That's my report. Thanks.
Anyone else? Councilor Shumway?
Well, I just want to thank our city clerk, our city manager, assistant city manager, for outstanding retreat and all the work that went into getting it on.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I attended the beautification committee. They are looking at, they discussed a little bit of some downtown lighting for going into 2025, and just did a little adjustment on a grant they had given. Also met with the Pilot Hill Committee, and they are kind of evaluating where they are with the parking lot, just due to increased prices. And so that's something that they've been thinking about, and trying to think, kind of consider how perhaps they reduce some of the amenities they had in place initially, to get that moving in a somewhat affordable manner. As we all know, prices have skyrocketed on everything, and it is no exception with them. So,
thank you. Councilor Newman?
My first meeting's tomorrow.
Okay. Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Mayor. As I mentioned earlier, I was at the Planning Commission meeting yesterday, and the main topic was the reconnecting West Laramie. And there were some good questions answered, but I want to thank all the council people here. Very in-depth questions here, and I appreciate that, because it's a lot, I think we're a very engaged council, so I appreciate that a bunch. So, and they had some good questions, but we added on to that, so thank you. It's something for them to think about.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Freed?
Thank you, Mayor. On January 15th, the Parks, Trees, and Rec Board met again for the second time. First meeting was to establish a chair, vice chair, and to listen to presentations about funding needs from different community organizations. Heard the presentations at the first meeting, I believe on the 8th, and then on the 15th. Spent quite a long time. I think there's 38 motions, and so I know Director Bork isn't here, but he did a great job of helping answer questions, and I know Assistant City Manager was there too, and to Jody. But they will be bringing a recommendation forth to the council at some point soon, that then we'll pass along to the Rec Board. So that happened, and then my only other comment is that I really appreciate all the help from the city clerk for the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, getting reservations, getting us there, representing Laramie, giving us an opportunity to be there. Found the boot camp really helpful. That was last week. So that was awesome. And then today I got to do the city tour with Assistant City Manager, City Manager Jordan, and go around the community, and it was awesome. So I know the other 3 incoming council members will get that, but just reaffirmed my belief that the city is doing excellent work and people are amazing here. So kind of reinvigorated me today. It was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. I had a meeting with Town and Gown Economic Development Subcommittee of the Steering Committee, and it was my closing out meeting while Melanie steps into that position, and we talked about how to best interface with the growth and development of the Albany County Housing Coalition, that we were looking at housing, but at this point, a number of the members that I was meeting with are also on that board. So that group will step back from housing and start to look at other issues. And what we determined is to try and get some of the data from the Provenza housing study, and then for our city has a survey that we may be putting out through the coalition, giving to them to use as a base and put that out. and that they would receive the data and use that data for programs and other development things. During that meeting, the group asked, as mayor, I move from the steering committee to the executive committee. And that's like the president here, the president of the university stuff. And we came up with the idea that with the permission of the executive committee, I would serve as the liaison to the steering committee for the executive committee, so that they're not so distant, because they're only going to meet with Town and Gown twice a year. And so that's it. That was that meeting, and I have a bunch coming up next week, but nothing more. Shall we look at the agenda, please? Any suggestions on the consent agenda? Councilor Newman.
We don't have to pull 9F as long as you can make a statement about what they're doing, about going underneath the road instead of closing the road.
Yeah, I thought that was very important.
Yeah, if you will do that, I won't pull it. If not, we need to pull 9F.
Is that appropriate, City Clerk, for me to make a statement like that? I haven't really seen that.
Pretty irregular.
It is irregular, so shall we pull it?
I would probably,
I don't think it'll take but a moment.
Yeah, I would probably pull it for clean.
Okay, let's pull that. That's my thinking too, because there's so much anxiety about blocking of the roads. Anything on the regular agenda? If you're finished, say okay. Okay. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work tonight.